Yuta stands before the girl of his dreams, his heart hammering against his ribs as he finally finds the words. With a deep breath, he asks her to go out with him, pouring every ounce of his courage into the request. He has known Michiru Ukuma since they were children, as she is his childhood friend who has been by his side for years. Their bond is deep, forged through living as neighbors and sharing countless moments since they were small. He remembers the events of the previous day, which led him to this point. He had spotted her in the hallway and approached with a nervous gulp, hoping for just a moment of her time. He listened as she greeted him warmly, but regretfully explained that she was busy with friends for the rest of the day. She promised to make time for him tomorrow, her kindness shining through even as other students whispered about her popularity. He watched her walk away, reflecting on how she was the literal definition of a school idol, beautiful, smart, and beloved by everyone. To him, she seemed like a being from a different world entirely. He recalled his younger self, a boy who struggled with sports and social situations, finding his only strength in the stories he loved to write. He had always felt like an outsider looking in on the world. He watched as she apologized again, remembering how she had been the only one who truly listened to his stories as a child, finding them fun when no one else did. Her genuine concern for his feelings only reinforced why he cared for her so much. He stood there dazed as she offered a final, cheerful farewell, promising to see him the next day. Her radiant smile left his heart racing at the simple prospect of their next meeting. He walked away with a firm stride, the weight of his feelings finally pushing him toward a decision. Tomorrow would be the day he stopped being just a friend and told her the truth. He had left her standing there, and now she wanders through the school corridors, her mind racing with confusion over his uncharacteristic behavior. She can't help but wonder what he truly wanted to say, feeling that he wasn't acting like himself at all. A sudden, heavy thud resonates in her chest as she pauses, her cheeks flushing with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. She is gripped by the nagging thought that whatever he held back might have been something of immense importance. While she grapples with her feelings, the world outside continues its frantic pace, the city streets teeming with the usual evening rush and the constant hum of urban life. Dominating the skyline, a massive digital display heralds the arrival of the Digital Masters film, a phenomenon that has captured the public's imagination. Passers-by marvel at the hit of the century, noting how tickets are selling like crazy and the popularity is simply insane. Navigating this dense crowd, Yuta moves with a quiet determination, barely noticing the strangers around him who are excitedly discussing the latest chapter of the very story he created. He ignores the bumps and shoves of the crowd, focused solely on his resolve to tell her everything tomorrow. His internal monologue is abruptly shattered when a towering, rough-looking man collides with him, nearly knocking him off balance. The man's companion quickly ushers him away, dismissing the encounter as a waste of time while they continue their enthusiastic debate over whether they prefer the manga or the anime adaptation of his work. He watches them disappear into the throng, struck by the realization that his creations reach even the most unexpected souls. A fleeting sense of isolation pricks at him as he sees couples flirting in the street, but he quickly dismisses it, reminding himself that he has someone special in his life too. As he continues his journey home, his thoughts drift back to Michiru and the unwavering support she has always shown for his amateur writing. He finds comfort in the memory of her genuine praise and the way she cheered him on, believing that she, above all others, truly recognizes his worth as a person. In his mind's eye, a radiant vision of her appears, draped in white, and calling his name with a joyful smile. This idealized image fuels his confidence, convincing him that she will take his feelings seriously and return his affection. The moment of truth finally arrives, and he pours his heart out in a desperate plea for her to go out with him. He tells himself that because she is so kind, it simply can't go any other way, yet as he stands before her, the stark contrast between his hopeful fantasy and the reality of her stunned, silent expression begins to settle in. He is met with a sharp, physical rejection as she slaps his hand away, her face contorted in disbelief and anger at his sudden confession. Stunned by the reaction, he stands frozen while she dismisses his heartfelt words as a triviality, revealing she had feared some family tragedy instead of a romantic admission. As he tries to process the dismissal, she begins rummaging through her bag with a sudden, frantic energy, completely ignoring the emotional weight of the moment. The reason for her distraction becomes clear when she pulls out her phone, her eyes lighting up at a notification for a new installment of his own work, Digital Masters. When he suggests they talk later, she explodes in a fit of rage, declaring her absolute devotion to the series and her inability to live without its regular updates. Moments later, she is lost in the story, her face glowing with genuine emotion as she praises the quality of the new release, unaware that the creator is standing right in front of her. Overwhelmed by the praise for his work, he offers a quiet thanks, which only confuses her further since she has no idea why he would be grateful for her fandom. She announces her intention to head home immediately to rewatch the anime adaptation, leaving him standing in the hallway, desperate to regain her attention. He attempts to bridge the gap by claiming his own passion for the series, but she scoffs at the comparison, asserting that he is like a lowly turtle trying to reach the moon compared to the legendary creator. Pushed to his limit by the irony of the situation, he finally shouts the truth of his identity as the creator, leaving her paralyzed as the weight of his words begins to sink in. She stares at him in disbelief, her face contorted with a mix of shock and mounting fury. When he claims to be the creator of her favorite series, she can only sputter in outrage, demanding to know what kind of desperate lie he is trying to spin. Dismissing his claim as a mere coincidence of names, she scoffs at the idea that he could be the legendary author. She accuses him of defiling a holy name and declares that while they might be friends, She cannot forgive such a blatant insult to her idol. He stands frozen as the weight of her rejection sinks in, his mind racing to find a way to prove his identity. The realization that he has no physical evidence leaves him reeling, making him wonder if all the times she praised his work were just a cruel illusion. In a desperate bid for credibility, he produces his laptop, displaying the original digital files of the latest chapter as undeniable proof. However, she remains unconvinced, dismissing the files as simple copies from the internet before turning to leave, her patience completely exhausted. She lashes out, convinced that this is some twisted form of revenge for her earlier rejection of his feelings. When he tries to grab her arm to stop her from leaving, she strikes him, her voice trembling with anger as she begs him to stop this charade. Her words become even sharper as she looks down at him with pure disdain, asserting that someone like him could never possess the talent of a best-selling author. In her mind, the real creator is a paragon of intelligence and beauty, a far cry from the boy standing before her. With a final, cold command for him to never speak to her again, she storms out of the classroom, leaving the door rattling in her wake. He is left alone in the silence, slumped over his desk as the reality of his social ruin begins to take hold. He collapses to the floor, the sound of his own ragged breathing and quiet sobs filling the empty room. Between gasps for air, he whispers the truth to the shadows, his heart breaking because the one person he wanted to impress now views him with utter contempt. As he stares blankly at the floor, his vision blurred by tears, he can't help but wonder how a simple confession of the truth led to such a catastrophic misunderstanding. The weight of his secret has become a crushing burden, leaving him hollow and defeated. Despite the current pain, he remembers the warmth of her past encouragement, recalling how her genuine joy for his stories was the fuel that kept him writing through sleepless nights. It was her voice that pulled him forward, making this sudden betrayal of her trust all the more agonizing to bear. He is shattered. The realization hits him like a physical blow. Her adoration was never for the boy standing before her, but for the phantom author of the story she loved. As he collapses over his desk, clutching his head in a desperate attempt to stifle his sobs, the weight of his delusion crushes him. Every word of praise he once cherished now feels like a cruel mockery, leaving him to weep in bitter, lonely silence. Still reeling from the pain, he finds no sanctuary even within the school walls. As he sits hunched over, his breath hitching in ragged gasps, the muffled sounds of his classmates' laughter drift through the room. They whisper to one another, wondering if the strange sounds are a prank or a genuine breakdown, oblivious to the boy who feels his very will to live slipping away into the cold void of embarrassment and despair. Because of the memory of her venomous rejection, the walk home feels like a funeral procession. He can still hear her voice ringing in his ears, a sharp command for him to never repeat his supposed joke again. The streets are empty, mirroring the hollow ache in his chest as frustration and self-pity take root, poisoning the memories of a girl who was once his sole inspiration. Moments later, he pulls out his phone, the screen illuminating his dazed expression with the harsh glow of his own success. There it is, Digital Masters, with hundreds of new impressions and comments from fans who adore a creator they don't truly know. He stares at the numbers, but they feel meaningless now. Without her, the drive to create has vanished, replaced by a haunting question of why he should even bother to continue. As the evening shadows lengthen, he sits in his room, watched only by the silent, unblinking eyes of a black cat. He reflects on the lie he told himself, that his writing was a bridge between them, a way to make her happy. Now that the bridge has been burned, he realizes he would be a fool to keep going, his silhouette appearing as a mere shadow of the person he used to be. With a heavy sigh, he stares into the digital abyss of his device, his resolve finally hardening into a cold, final decision. He tells himself that this is the only way to survive, the only way to stop the bleeding. If he doesn't sever this tie once and for all, he will remain trapped in this cycle of longing and rejection forever. Finally, he opens his profile on the writing platform, his fingers trembling slightly as he navigates to the update screen. With a few swift taps, he types out a message that will end his career as a novelist. I'm retiring. I'm done. He hits the update button, the finality of the action reflecting in his hollow, tear-streaked eyes as he prepares to walk away from the world he built. The news of the sudden retirement spreads like wildfire across the digital landscape. Fans and readers are in a state of absolute shock, their screens filled with desperate pleas and disbelief as the announcement that the author of Digimus is stepping down finally sinks in. Amidst the digital storm, the young author himself walks calmly through the evening streets, a faint, satisfied smile playing on his lips. He feels a profound sense of liberation, reasoning that with both an anime and a movie adaptation already secured, his work is complete and he is finally free from the burden of creation. His moment of quiet reflection is interrupted by the sharp trill of his smartphone. Looking down, he sees the name of his editor, Mai Sakura, flashing on the screen, and he answers with a cautious greeting. The voice on the other end is anything but calm, exploding with a frantic demand for his whereabouts. He recoils from the sheer volume of her shouting, stammering that he was simply making his way home as she continues to press him for an explanation regarding his sudden decision. Before he can offer a proper response, she abruptly ends the call, declaring her intention to meet him at his residence immediately. He stands frozen for a moment, staring at the darkened screen of his device, bewildered by the intensity of her reaction. He eventually reaches the familiar gates of his home, the quiet suburban street offering a stark contrast to the chaos he knows is brewing. As he steps inside, he whispers a soft greeting to the empty hallway, convinced that the most difficult part of his journey is finally behind him. However, the peace is shattered the instant he crosses the threshold, as his mother and sister lunge toward him in a frantic, tearful embrace. They swarm him with panicked questions, fearing that some hidden trauma or workplace bullying has driven him to such a drastic measure. His sister thrusts her phone toward his face, the screen displaying the very news that has sent their world into a tailspin. He can only look on in awkward silence, realizing that his choice has impacted those closest to him far more deeply than he had anticipated. He desperately tries to reassure them, insisting that he is perfectly fine and that no one has mistreated him. His mother, however, remains unconvinced. Her protective instincts flared as she demands to know who is responsible so she can give them a piece of her mind. Once the initial hysteria subsides, the three of them gather in the living room, the air thick with unspoken questions. His mother finally breaks the silence, looking him directly in the eye and asking the one question he isn't quite ready to answer. What truly drove him to walk away from it all? He sits between his mother and Michiru, the weight of his confession hanging heavy in the air. He admits that the drive to create has simply vanished, leaving him without the motivation to continue writing. Michiru reacts with frantic desperation, grabbing his arm and shaking him as she begs for an explanation. His mother, Yutako, tries to rationalize the situation, wondering if it is merely a severe case of writer's block, but he clarifies that he simply wants to walk away from it all. This admission sends Michiru into a full-blown tantrum. She collapses to the floor, flailing her limbs wildly, and crying out that her life would be over without his work to read. He and his mother can only watch in stunned silence as the young girl's dramatic display of grief fills the room. Seeing his distress, Yutako gently pulls him into a protective embrace, ignoring Michiru's continued protests. She shushes the younger girl, telling her to calm down, while softly patting his head to offer comfort. She looks him in the eyes, her expression full of unconditional warmth, and tells him that while she is a fan of his work, her love for him as her son is immeasurably greater. She promises not to press him for the reasons behind his decision, a gesture of trust that brings tears to his eyes. The emotional dam breaks as Michiru lunges forward to join the embrace, her earlier anger replaced by a tearful acceptance of his choice. Yutako reaffirms her support, stating that if this is truly what he has decided, she will respect his path, and asks him not to cry. He can only offer a choked-out word of thanks, his face buried against his mother's shoulder as he finally lets out the emotions he had been bottling up. The tender moment is shattered by a sudden, violent crash as the front door is thrown open with a deafening slam. A voice bellows his name from the hallway, startling the three of them as they sit huddled on the sofa. The intruder is revealed to be his father, the vice chief, who stands in the doorway panting heavily as if he had run the entire way home. He stares at his son in disbelief, his professional composure completely gone as he demands to know why this is happening. The man breaks down into frantic sobs, rubbing his eyes as he pleads with his son not to give up. He reveals the stakes of the situation, claiming that if the series ends, his own position at the company is in jeopardy, and he might even face termination. Driven by a mix of professional panic and fatherly desperation, he grabs his son by the shoulders and begins to shake him vigorously. He shouts that the boy is not just the company's greatest asset, but a treasure to the entire nation, while the young author can only plead for him to stop the dizzying assault. He remains slumped on the floor, trembling and offering pathetic apologies while his wife looms over him with a terrifying aura, demanding he stop harassing their son. Yuta and Michiru can only watch in silent disbelief at the sight of the man's complete lack of dignity. He is suddenly interrupted as the front door slams open and Mei Sakura strides into the home, her presence commanding immediate attention. She confidently tells the vice chief to step aside and leave the situation to her, asserting her role as a capable editor. Standing tall in the middle of the room, she points toward the street where her motorcycle is parked, her expression one of professional determination. The young author is caught completely off guard by her sudden arrival and the authoritative way she takes charge of the room. Without waiting for an explanation, she firmly grips his arm and begins dragging him toward the exit, informing the stunned parents that she will be borrowing him for a while. The vice chief can only watch, bewildered, as his son is whisked away. She leans in close to the boy, her voice dropping to a more personal tone as she explains that the company has ordered her to handle this, and she has made it her personal mission to pull him out of his current slump. Behind them, the father is left reeling from the bluntness of her words. They head outside, where she tosses Yuta a spare jacket and helmet, ignoring his confusion as she prepares the bike for departure. She casually asks if he has any objections to eating yakiniku, making it clear that the evening's plans are already set. As they mount the powerful machine, he finds himself forced to hold on to her waist, his face flushing a deep crimson from the proximity. He is overwhelmed by the situation, his heart racing as he realizes he is about to go on a high-speed ride with a grown woman. He feels the engine roar to life as they blast off into the night, leaving the quiet neighborhood behind. Despite his initial fear, the sensation of the wind and the pleasant scent of her hair begin to soothe his troubled mind, making him feel the weight of everyone's concern for him. They soon arrive at a brightly lit restaurant, but as they step inside, he notices the interior is strangely quiet and devoid of other customers. He questions the lack of people, wondering if they have come to the wrong place or if it is already closed. She triumphantly announces that she has booked the entire establishment just for the two of them, gesturing toward a table laden with high-quality meat. When Yuta expresses shock at the cost, Mei simply laughs it off, explaining that the company was more than happy to foot the bill to keep their star author happy. At the yakiniku restaurant, The sizzle of meat on the grill fills the air as Mei expertly flips a piece and offers it to Yuta. He looks on, still a bit bewildered by the sudden change in scenery, questioning why they are eating such a heavy meal. She simply smiles, explaining that her family motto is to eat meat whenever one feels down. She savors a bite with a look of pure bliss, declaring that good meat doesn't even need sauce. Watching her, he can't help but feel she is operating on an entirely different level of confidence, a sentiment echoed by a memory of Michiru's energetic voice. Noticing his hesitation, she leans in slightly, her sharp eyes softening as she asks what is troubling him. He tries to distract himself by taking a bite, admitting the food is indeed excellent, but the weight on his mind remains heavy. She then leans closer with a playful glint in her eye, asking if a girl was the one to break his heart. The question catches him completely off guard, causing him to choke on his drink in a sudden, messy spray of surprise. As he coughs and tries to regain his composure, he asks how she could possibly have known. She just laughs it off, attributing her uncanny accuracy to nothing more than a woman's intuition. The atmosphere shifts to a more serious tone as she asks if he is ready to talk about the details. He looks down, admitting that the feelings were entirely one-sided and that there was never an actual relationship to begin with. He finds himself comforted by her calm, mature presence and the simple kindness she offers over a cup of tea. He realizes that despite his usual aversion to prying, there are moments when it feels right to let the burden out. With a heavy sigh, he clenches his cup, the ceramic clicking against the table as he finally confesses the full story. She listens intently, summarizing the tragedy. His childhood friend rejected him, and in a moment of sheer desperation, he impulsively announced his retirement from the world of writing. She looks at him with a gentle, understanding smile, glad that he is finally opening up. Despite the confession, he admits that he still lacks the motivation to pick up his pen again. She counters firmly, explaining that it wasn't his creative work or his characters that failed him, but rather a personal heartbreak that clouded his vision. She concludes by reminding him that every author carries a certain responsibility to their craft. She acknowledges that his childhood friend was his primary reason for writing, and while that reason is gone, its importance cannot be denied. She leans forward, her voice steady as she explains that once an author breathes life into characters, it becomes their solemn duty to guide that story to its natural end. The young man listens, the weight of the word responsibility hanging heavy in the air between them. Reaching into her bag, she pulls out her smartphone and presents the screen to him, revealing that his sudden announcement has already become headline news. She softens her tone, admitting that while she is his editor, she is also a devoted fan who has grown to love the world he created. She urges him to look at his own social media accounts to witness the true scale of his influence. He stares at the device in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how such a massive reaction could have gathered in the mere hours since he hit post. The screen is a blur of activity, filled with thousands of notifications and messages from concerned readers. He can hardly believe his eyes as the sheer volume of the public's response begins to sink in. As he scrolls through the endless stream of comments, the raw emotion of his audience becomes undeniable. People from all over are pleading with him not to stop, describing how the characters he created have become a vital part of their lives. Tears well up in his eyes as the realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. He finally understands that his work isn't just a project. It's a living entity he brought into the world, a child that he cannot simply abandon. Seeing his internal struggle, she pulls a small plushie of one of his characters close to her chest, confessing that even she hasn't had her fill of their adventures yet. She asks him directly if he can truly turn his back on the countless people who have fallen in love with his work. He bows his head, admitting that his decision to quit was a rash mistake born of his own emotional turmoil. Looking at the phone again, he realizes that leaving his audience in limbo would be an act of profound irresponsibility. He reflects on his own selfishness, realizing that his desire to quit was fueled by a misunderstanding of his own passion for storytelling. She watches him closely, reminding him that while the choice to continue is ultimately his, he shouldn't betray the trust of the readers or the characters who depend on him. With a newfound sense of purpose, he looks her in the eye and declares his intention to continue writing. He vows to see the story through, not just for the fans who support him, but for the characters who live within the pages of his mind. He bows deeply, expressing his sincere gratitude to the woman who helped him find his path again. In response, she waves off his formality with a boisterous call for red wine, her celebratory mood contrasting sharply with his humble posture as they conclude their meeting. As the night progresses, she indulges in the celebration with a fervor that leaves him wide-eyed and speechless. Amidst a flurry of playful insults and heavy drinking, the weight of his previous decision begins to lift, replaced by the chaotic energy of a new beginning. This renewed motivation soon manifests in a public declaration, as a message goes out to the world retracting the retirement of the author of Digital Masters. The digital screen glows with the promise of a story that will continue, sparking a wave of relief across the internet. Seeing the news on her own device, she collapses onto her bed in a fit of ecstatic relief, her legs kicking the air as she celebrates the survival of her favorite series. Yet, even in her joy, a nagging question lingers about why the author would have considered such a drastic move in the first place. She violently shakes her head, trying to dispel the impossible thought that her childhood friend could actually be the genius creator she admires. Memories of her own harsh words and dismissive attitude toward his ambitions haunt her, making the reality of his identity too painful to accept. Sitting up with a somber expression, she begins to grasp the magnitude of the opportunity she might have squandered through her own arrogance. The realization that she may one day have to beg for his forgiveness weighs heavily on her, as she acknowledges the incredible talent she failed to recognize. Elsewhere, other devoted readers share in this collective sigh of relief, their faces lighting up as they confirm that their beloved story is safe. While the blonde girl clutches her phone in joy, her companion expresses her gratitude that the series will continue, both unaware of the personal turmoil that nearly brought the author's journey to a premature end. The night air is split by the roar of a train crossing the bridge, carrying the weight of a major decision. Having retracted the retirement, the journey home from the restaurant begins in earnest. Inside the rhythmic clatter of the carriage, she has already begun to celebrate, drinking wine directly from the bottle with a reckless abandon that leaves him worrying about the bicycle left behind. She leans in close, thrusting her phone toward him to show the explosion of comments following the announcement, her excitement palpable as she marvels at the sheer volume of engagement in such a short time. As the train continues its journey, she confesses to having ignored the fans for too long, admitting with a soft smile that she herself is among those who deeply admire his work. Her expression turns contemplative as she reflects on the shifting landscape of the industry, where authors can now reach their audience directly, making her wonder if the traditional role of an editor is becoming obsolete. She looks down, her voice softening as she declares her intent to remain his most dedicated supporter, even as he clumsily tries to reassure her of her immense value to his career. He watches her closely, struck by the rare vulnerability on the face of a woman usually known for her cool, professional composure, finding this side of her even more captivating. She leans forward, her gaze steady and intense as she reaffirms that her primary mission is to be the one person who understands his creative process better than anyone else. With a final, heartfelt admission, she tells him that working by his side has been the greatest highlight of her life. She continues, her voice trembling slightly as she admits her desire to be his partner for life, not just in name, but in every sense. Yuta can only stare, stunned by the weight of her request and the sincerity in her eyes. Hearing her speak so passionately about working with him sends his heart racing, the rhythmic thumping echoing in his ears. It wasn't just about his talent as an author. She valued him as a person, a realization that fills him with a profound sense of joy. In that quiet moment amidst the train's steady rumble, he feels a deep gratitude for her presence in his life. They share a small, symbolic toast to their continued partnership, though she admits with a playful pout that she still feels a twinge of jealousy. She points out the irony of the situation, noting that while she was the one moved to write the praise that fueled his motivation, his own childhood friend hadn't even recognized his work. The contrast between her unwavering support and the indifference of others is stark. Leaning in closer, her cheeks flushed with a warm glow, she suggests that such a heartfelt confession would make any girl's heart skip a beat. He stammers a response, his composure crumbling under her intense gaze. He reflects on how his childhood friend saw him as nothing more than a familiar face, refusing to believe in his potential. As he dwells on this, she leans in even further, her voice a soft whisper as she teases him for being so oblivious to her feelings. Suddenly, she closes the distance entirely, her face inches from his as she boldly asks if he wants to date. The question hangs in the air, leaving him completely speechless and wide-eyed with shock. Before he can react, her hand finds his thigh with a sudden, firm pressure. He jolts in pure panic as she begins to rub, the physical contact sending his mind into a total tailspin. He is frozen in place, his face a mask of pure shock as she leans in with reckless abandon. Her proximity is overwhelming, and the sensation of her pressing against him sends his thoughts into a frantic spiral. When she boldly suggests they start dating, his mind goes completely blank, unable to process the sudden escalation. Because of this sudden proposal, he can only stammer in confusion, questioning why she would even want to be with him. She doesn't miss a beat, spinning around to face him directly while explaining that his previous rejection has cleared the path for them. She begins to list his virtues, his fame, his wealth, and his promising future, as if checking off a list of reasons why they are a perfect match. In response to his hesitation, she suddenly pulls him toward her, closing the distance in an instant. Before he can react, she plants a soft kiss on his cheek, whispering that they would make a truly wonderful couple. The physical contact leaves him reeling, his heart racing as the reality of the situation sinks in. Moments later, she pulls back slightly, her gaze softening as she looks at his flustered expression and calls him cute. He is left in a state of total mental collapse, his thoughts a chaotic mess of disbelief as he tries to make sense of her sudden, intense affection. As the chaos unfolds, their public display begins to draw the attention of the other passengers on the train. Whispers and judgmental glances follow them, with some onlookers suggesting they find a private room, while others wonder if the scene is being staged for a camera. It becomes painfully obvious to everyone watching that she is completely and utterly intoxicated. The tension is finally broken by the announcement of the next stop, signaling his departure. He quickly gathers himself, thanking her for the day as he prepares to exit. Despite his haste, she remains draped over the seat, her presence lingering even as the doors begin to slide open. Meanwhile, as he makes his way toward the exit, she calls out to him one last time from the departing train. She expresses her gratitude for their partnership, telling him that his sincerity is what makes him so attractive. He can only offer a flustered warning for her to be careful on her way home, his face still burning from her parting words. Once the train roars away into the night, he is left alone on the platform, burying his face in his hands as the sheer embarrassment of the encounter washes over him. Even in the silence, her voice echoes in his mind, insisting that she was serious about everything she said, leaving him to wonder if this was more than just a drunken whim. Walking home through the quiet streets, he begins to reflect on the evening with a sense of weary gratitude. He considers that perhaps her boldness was just a clumsy attempt to cheer him up after his recent hardships. He realizes that the kindness of those around him, his family, his editor, and even his distant fans, has slowly begun to mend the cracks in his heart. With a newfound sense of purpose, he reaches his destination and looks up at the night sky, his determination renewed. He resolves to channel these complex emotions into his work, ready to return to his desk and pour everything into the next chapter of his story. He ran through the streets, his breath coming in sharp, rhythmic gasps as he hurried home under the cover of night. After the long night, the city began to stir with the first light of dawn. The rhythmic clatter of the morning train echoed through the neighborhood as birds chirped in the trees, and inside the house, a familiar, energetic voice called out to him, signaling the start of a new day. Hearing his sister's voice, he stirred from his sleep only to find her sitting on the edge of his bed, sobbing uncontrollably. She apologized through her tears, explaining that she had just finished reading the chapter he had posted late last night, and the emotional weight of his words had moved her so deeply that she couldn't contain her reaction. She quickly wiped her eyes and thrust her phone toward him, showing him the overwhelming response his work had already received. Despite the late hour of the post, the view count was soaring, and the comment section was flooded with messages from fans who had been eagerly awaiting his return. He looked on in disbelief, realizing that his family weren't the only ones who loved his story. Overcome with joy and pride, she suddenly lunged forward, pinning him to the mattress with a tight embrace. She nuzzled against him, declaring how happy she was that he hadn't given up and how proud she felt to be the sister of someone who could write something so wonderful, her affection leaving him pinned under her enthusiastic praise. After finally managing to untangle himself from her grasp, he followed her down the stairs as she skipped ahead, chanting about breakfast. He watched her energetic descent, marveling at how quickly her mood had shifted from tears to pure excitement, and thanked her quietly for the support. As he entered the living room, he was immediately intercepted by his father, who let out a deafening wail of relief. The older man clung to him, sobbing about how his son's decision to keep writing had saved his own career, thanking him profusely as his dramatic outburst echoed through the house. While his father continued to cling to him like an octopus, his mother looked on with a warm, knowing smile from the kitchen. She greeted him gently, though she eventually had to tell her husband to stop smothering their son, even as the man declared him the savior of the entire family. The domestic peace was briefly interrupted as his mother sharply reminded his father to get his act together, pointing out that the only reason he was still employed was because of his son's success. She didn't hold back, calling his reliance on a teenager's work pathetic, which sent the man into a comical fit of shock and despair while the siblings began their meal. Amidst the bickering, she pulled him into a soft, comforting hug, her tone turning serious and tender. She whispered that he should ignore his father's pressure and that if he ever truly wanted to quit for his own sake, he should feel free to do so, leaving him enveloped in her quiet support. She continues to reassure her son, insisting that she is managing the household finances and that he should simply do what makes him happy. Despite his lingering doubts about his father's ability to support them, she remains firm, promising they will find a way to make things work. Because of her unwavering support, she tells him that even if certain people expect too much, he has every right to ignore them. As his father twitches nervously in the background, she reminds her son that he is still just a regular high school student who should focus on his studies and experiencing life. Her voice softens as she admits that seeing him force himself into roles he doesn't want only increases her worry. As a mother, her only true desire is for him to be able to lead a normal, happy life. This emotional display triggers a sudden reaction from his younger sister, who lunges forward in a fit of sobbing. Clinging to him, she cries out that she cannot bear to see him sad, while their mother joins the tearful embrace. He is deeply moved by the overwhelming warmth and kindness of his family. Though he feels a sense of déjà vu at their intensity, he finds the strength to declare that, despite everything, he truly still wants to write. Moments later, the heavy atmosphere shifts into a chaotic but joyful breakfast. While his father enjoys the meal, his mother playfully tries to smother him with affection and kisses, prompting him to jokingly push her away. As the meal continues, his sister's attention is suddenly caught by a breaking news report on the television. The broadcast highlights the massive cultural phenomenon of his work, leaving him completely stunned as he realizes the scale of what he has created. His father then steps in to provide the staggering details, mentioning a box office revenue of 50 billion yen. He explains that the franchise has grown into a massive entity with countless printed copies and merchandise, leaving the young author reeling from the sheer numbers. Seeing his son's shock, the man asks if he would like to attend an upcoming party to celebrate these incredible achievements. He notes that his editor likely hasn't mentioned it yet, while the boy wonders to himself when exactly things became this significant. The father then produces a formal invitation to a celebration at the Royal Hyatt Shinjuku, rummaging through his bag to find it. As his sister marvels at the prestigious venue, the young man stares at the card, finally beginning to grasp the monumental impact of his success. He stares at the invitation, the realization of his success finally sinking in as his sister points out the prestige of the Royal Hyatt Shinjuku, a first-class hotel located right next to the Metropolitan Government Building. As the family gathers for dinner, his sister beams with pride, calling him an absolute genius for creating such a hit, while his father boisterously recounts how the movie's massive earnings allowed the production to book an entire luxury hotel for the celebration. Despite the excitement, he remains conflicted, wondering how he can attend while still keeping his identity as the author a secret from the public, a concern his mother and sister discuss as they note his lack of experience with such grand events. He sighs, realizing that his previous anxieties about his popularity and his past feelings for Michiru were perhaps overblown, especially since he acknowledges that he isn't exactly a magnet for female attention anyway. Seeing his hesitation, his father begins to offer him a way out, suggesting he could simply decline the invitation if the pressure of the event feels like too much to handle. But then, a new resolve takes hold. He looks up with a determined expression and declares his desire to go, hoping that stepping into this new world will finally help him move on from the memories of his past crush. His father erupts with joy, promising a grand time and mentioning that he'll get to meet the director and the incredibly famous voice actress, Kamigane Yuri, along with the rest of the talented cast. The mention of the name catches him off guard, as he recalls hearing her voice during the anime's audition process, a fact his sister quickly teases him about, noting his apparent obsession with the voice actress. A memory flickers in his mind of the day he first heard her introduce herself during the auditions, her voice leaving a lasting and deep impression that he hadn't quite forgotten. Back in the present, the table is filled with laughter and light-hearted bickering as his father shamelessly plans to bring autograph boards to the party, much to his mother's amusement and mock disapproval of his pathetic behavior. He had already set the stage for their departure, leaving the siblings to finish their meal in a state of high-strung energy. While his sister scrolls through her phone, searching for information on the lead actress, the young writer can hardly contain his anticipation. Yuta reflects on the magnitude of the upcoming event, realizing that this will be his first true introduction to the professional world, and the thought brings a bright, hopeful smile to his face. He nods in silent agreement as his sister marvels at the stunning image on her screen, struck by the actress's undeniable grace. To him, this isn't just a social gathering, it feels like a threshold. He is convinced that the party will serve as the definitive start of a brand new chapter in his life, a moment where his dreams finally intersect with reality. Yuta and his father arrive at a grand hotel in Shinjuku, the air thick with the anticipation of a high-profile event. Clad in a crisp, new suit that feels slightly foreign on his frame, the young man feels a wave of nerves as they head toward a celebration party for the Digima's movie crew. His father, brimming with uncharacteristic excitement, promises to show him around the venue, urging him to keep up as they navigate the bustling lobby. However, the plan quickly falls apart as the scale of the building overwhelms them. A few minutes later, the boy finds himself standing alone in a quiet, carpeted hallway, completely lost within the labyrinthine hotel. His father had rushed off in a panic to find someone for directions, leaving him to stand in the silence, wondering what his next move should be. While his father frantically searches for a staff member in another part of the building, the boy checks his watch, his anxiety mounting with every passing second. 10 minutes have already slipped by, and the realization that they might be in the wrong place entirely begins to sink in. He sighs, wishing he had known his father's sense of direction would fail them so spectacularly, as the man continues to wander aimlessly elsewhere. Deciding he can't wait in the hallway forever, he contemplates finding his own way to the party. As he wanders further down the corridor, he spots a figure ahead and calls out, hoping for some guidance. A young woman with long, dark hair stops and turns toward him, her presence immediately commanding the space. She greets him with a gentle smile, her elegance catching him off guard. With a kind and curious expression, she asks if something is wrong, her voice soft and welcoming in the empty hallway. Her dress flows slightly as she moves, adding to the grace of her sudden appearance. The sight of her leaves him momentarily breathless, his mind racing to process the encounter. He is struck by her stunning appearance and the way she speaks to him so gently, his heart hammering against his ribs. To him, she seems to have appeared out of nowhere just when he was at his wit's end, looking like someone from a completely different world. Overwhelmed by her beauty, he begins to stutter and blush furiously, unable to hide how flustered he has become. He worries that she is about to laugh at his awkwardness, noticing a slight, knowing smirk playing on her lips as he fumbles through a response. The contrast between her composure and his panic is painfully obvious. A painful memory of past social failures flashes through his mind, making him feel even more pathetic in this moment. He expects a cold dismissal, but she simply continues to look at him, her gaze steady and surprisingly patient. He laments his situation, feeling like a complete amateur as he tries to regain some semblance of dignity. The tension breaks when she realizes they are both attending the same event. She asks if he is there for the Digima's party, noting that they seem to be around the same age, likely both in their second year of high school. With a cheerful peace sign and a warm smile, she encourages him to relax, pointing out that they are in the same boat and there's no need to be so tense. She carries herself with a maturity that belies their shared age, her presence both intimidating and strangely comforting to the boy standing beside her. As they stand in the bustling hotel corridor, they find common ground in their shared awkwardness, eventually deciding to wait together for his father's return. The silence between them stretches, thick with the self-consciousness of youth, until she finally breaks the quiet by asking for his name, prompting him to stammer out a response. Hearing his name, she offers her own name with a dazzling, effortless grace, insisting that he use her first name, Yuri. He is momentarily paralyzed by her social confidence, wondering if he is standing in the presence of an actual angel who can navigate social situations with such ease. He repeats the name softly, a strange sense of familiarity tugging at his mind, though he can't quite place why it sounds so right, while she laughs at his serious expression and teases him for being funny. Turning her attention back to him, She inquires about his connection to the Digimas project, curious as to what brought a boy his age to such an event. He hesitates, the secret of his identity as the author weighing heavily on him while she waits expectantly for his answer. She leans in, assuming that he must be quite familiar with the series given his presence at the celebration. He can only offer a flustered apology, his mind screaming that knowing the series doesn't even begin to cover his relationship with his own creation, while she remains oblivious to his inner turmoil. Suddenly, her face lights up with a radiant, pure joy as she declares herself to be the greatest fan the series has ever known. The sheer intensity of her smile sends a jolt through him, her passion for the work evident in every line of her expression. She explains that her devotion began the very moment the first chapter was released, her eyes shimmering with a genuine, idol-like glint. When he asks what specifically draws her to the story, she warns him with a playful smile that the list is far too long to summarize quickly, her excitement palpable. She then launches into a spirited breakdown of the characters and the narrative, her enthusiasm growing with every word as she recounts her favorite moments and the depth of the protagonist, Ryo. She speaks of the charming cast and the way the story resonates with her, her face lit with a pure, unadulterated joy. He watches her, deeply moved to encounter such a passionate fan who isn't bound to him by blood or professional duty. As she continues her enthusiastic breakdown, realizing she has been rambling for quite some time, she stops abruptly, her face flushing with a deep embarrassment as she worries that her intense fandom might have been off-putting or even creepy. She apologizes profusely, her hands fidgeting as she looks away. He quickly reassures her with a warm, genuine smile, telling her that he is actually very happy to hear how much she loves the series, finding a strange comfort in her honest enthusiasm. He watches as Yuri leans in, her eyes sparkling with a mix of curiosity and excitement as she asks if he shares her passion for Digimas. A blush creeps onto her cheeks, and he can't help but think how thrilled the author would be to know such a devoted fan exists, even as he confirms his own deep interest in the series. He finds himself swept up in her enthusiasm as they dive into a detailed discussion about the story, specifically the impact of the character Ryo's introduction. Yuri's face lights up with every word, her joy radiating as they lose themselves in the shared language of the fandom, oblivious to the bustling party around them. The conversation flows so naturally that it feels as though they have known each other for years, a rare and comfortable connection that makes the passage of time seem to stand still. Yuri laughs, her demeanor open and warm, while he reflects on the strange, wonderful ease of their interaction. They stand together in the quiet hallway, where she expresses her genuine admiration for his extensive knowledge of the series, admitting that even as a longtime fan, she is impressed by his insights. He stands there, a bit awkward but touched, as her laughter echoes softly in the space between them. He feels a pang of guilt as he accepts her praise, knowing the secret he is keeping about his true identity as the creator she admires so much. Yuri, unaware of the irony, continues to pour out her heart, explaining that she has never met anyone she could open up to about her love for the series quite like this. He is suddenly struck by a revelation that leaves him speechless. Yuri wasn't just a fan, she was the one who gave a voice to the characters he created. As she blushes and admits how happy she was to be part of the production, the weight of their connection takes on a whole new dimension, leaving him reeling from the shock. The reality of her status is confirmed when passersby recognize her as the famous voice actress Kamigenyu, whispering in awe of her beauty and talent. Despite the sudden attention, she remains humble and slightly embarrassed, downplaying her fame while he watches, trying to reconcile the girl he was just talking to with the celebrity before him. She explains the sheer amount of effort she put into her role, practicing day and night to be worthy of the characters, a dedication that deeply moves him. Then, with a shy but determined look, she pulls out her phone and asks if they could exchange contact information, catching him completely off guard. He panics internally, his mind racing as he realizes the absurdity of the situation. A famous actress is asking for the number of an author she doesn't even know she's talking to. He shakes his head frantically, overwhelmed by the irony and the sudden pressure of the moment. He feels his heart hammering against his ribs as she softly admits that she genuinely enjoyed their time together and wants to get to know him better, not just as a fan, but as a person. Despite his nerves and the secrets between them, he finds himself agreeing, a new and uncertain chapter beginning with a simple exchange of numbers. He smiles warmly, expressing his own desire to keep in touch, which brings a bright, joyful blush to her face as she realizes the feeling is mutual. They quickly exchange their contact information on their phones, a moment of shared happiness that is suddenly interrupted when his father calls out to him from down the hall. Their private moment vanishes as the older man approaches, his face lighting up with surprise as he loudly questions if his son was just addressed as the author, a revelation that leaves her completely stunned. He continues, oblivious to the tension, introducing himself as the boy's father and even asking for an autograph, while the young author can only offer a sheepish confirmation of his secret identity. She stands frozen, her mind racing with the realization that the boy she was just talking to is actually the creator she admires so much, her face contorting in a mix of shock and overwhelming excitement. She remains speechless as the father beams with pride, while the boy tries to offer a clumsy apology for not finding a better way to reveal the truth sooner. She finally reaches her limit, the weight of the revelation causing her to lose consciousness and collapse to the floor, sending both the father and son into a state of pure panic. He looks on in disbelief, his mind reeling as he reflects on the chaotic end to his first real encounter with the beautiful and talented voice actress. He watches as she lies on the ground with a blissful smile, murmuring that she can die happy now that she has spoken to her idol, even as bystanders scramble to call for medical assistance. She is left behind as the focus shifts to a different part of the building, where another young woman walks with her companion, glancing back briefly before continuing on her path. She paused, a faint blush touching her cheeks as she replayed the words in her mind. She was certain she had heard someone call out the name Kamamatsu-sama, a title of great reverence. Yet, she quickly dismissed the notion, telling herself it simply couldn't be possible in a place like this. He is ushered through the bustling backstage area as his father leaves him in the care of the event staff, who are eager to introduce the author to the crowd. Blindsided by the news that he is expected to go on stage as a surprise guest, his mind reels from the sudden turn of events, struggling to process the weight of the situation. He remains behind the heavy curtain, his heart hammering against his ribs as the roar of the crowd filters through the fabric. The event is a massive success, celebrating the record-breaking box office of Digital Masters, Infinite Heaven's Arena. While the staff expresses their excitement about the turnout, he feels completely out of place, overwhelmed by the sheer number of people waiting just a few feet away. The young man retreats into a corner, clutching his head in a fit of social anxiety, feeling like a sore thumb among the polished professionals. Meanwhile, out on the main stage, the atmosphere is electric as the director, Miyakawa, takes the microphone to address the cheering audience. She begins her speech with a bluntness that catches the crowd off guard, her deep voice and commanding presence leading many to realize for the first time that the acclaimed director is a woman. Ignoring the murmurs of surprise, she credits the film's success to the hard work of everyone involved, declaring it a collective victory for the entire team. Following her lead, the room erupts in a celebratory toast, glasses clinking as they honor the greatness of the project. From his vantage point in the wings, Yuto watches the spectacle, feeling a strange mix of pride and trepidation as the director prepares to reveal the next surprise of the evening. The lights dim slightly as she poses a question to the audience, teasing the arrival of a very special guest. A wave of hushed anticipation sweeps through the hall, with guests whispering and leaning forward to catch a glimpse of who might appear next. As the introduction begins, he feels his heart skip a beat, wondering if the director is referring to him. However, his anxiety is momentarily replaced by confusion as a different figure, Alyssa, is called to the stage, her elegant silhouette appearing from the opposite side of the wings. She steps into the spotlight, her voice clear and melodic as she introduces herself to the adoring fans. The crowd's reaction is instantaneous and deafening, a chorus of cheers and whistles greeting the singer who performed the movie's opening theme. Yuta stares in realization, finally connecting the name to the famous idol who has taken the industry by storm. Standing tall and radiant, she commands the stage with a grace that borders on the ethereal, her stunning figure and composed demeanor captivating everyone in the room. It is clear to all present that Alyssa Seba is not just a singer, but a star whose presence elevates the entire celebration to a new level of prestige. She stands bathed in the spotlight, her voice carrying a weight that leaves the young man in the wings breathless. From his vantage point, the sheer radiance of her presence is undeniable, a beauty that transcends the distance between them. As her melody fills the grand hall, the lyrics speak of leaving the past behind and carrying fervor into the future. Backstage, the observers are struck by the profound depth her live performance adds to the song, a stark contrast to the recorded version they know so well. Finishing her final note with a graceful bow, she is met with a thunderous roar of approval from the sea of fans. Watching from the shadows, the boy realizes that the success of their project wasn't just her doing, but the collective effort of every soul present in that room. The spectators are swept up in a wave of raw emotion, some shouting their love while others are moved to tears by the power of the music. It is a moment of pure, shared connection, leaving no doubt that the journey to this celebration was worth every effort. Stepping forward to reclaim the stage, the director offers her heartfelt thanks to the singer and the gathered crowd. She humbly admits that while the film's success is monumental, the credit belongs to more than just her own vision or the performance they just witnessed. With a triumphant smile, she announces the arrival of a very special guest, signaling the moment the young man has been dreading. Behind the curtain, his body tenses with every word, even as a supportive hand on his shoulder urges him to step into the light. He emerges from the wings, squinting against the blinding glare of the spotlights that suddenly find him. A murmur of confusion ripples through the audience as they see a mere student, but the director's voice rings out, formally introducing him as the brilliant mind behind the entire creation. Standing before the massive crowd, the teenager feels a crushing sense of being out of place, his voice barely a whisper as he offers a tentative greeting. The weight of thousands of eyes makes the stage feel like an island, and for a moment, he is certain he doesn't belong there. Instead of the rejection he feared, the hall explodes into a cacophony of cheers and excited shouts. The fans are electrified by the revelation of his youth, their voices rising in a unified chant of his pen name, celebrating the genius of the young creator standing before them. This unexpected warmth washes over him, his heart racing with a mixture of shock and profound relief. He had come expecting to be a footnote to the singer's performance, but the genuine joy of the crowd makes him realize that he, too, is a vital part of this celebration. He stands on stage, overwhelmed as the director expresses her profound gratitude for the world he created. The weight of the moment causes him to bow low, his face flushed with a mix of shock and humility. While he remains bowed, a graceful figure approaches and offers a deep, respectful bow of her own, introducing herself with a voice full of reverence. She catches him off guard with such a formal greeting, but his confusion turns to concern when he notices a stray tear fall from her eye. Looking closer, he realizes with a start that she is actually weeping. He watches as she struggles to compose herself, apologizing for the sudden display of emotion while explaining that meeting her beloved creator is a dream come true. The director watches with a knowing smile, gently encouraging the young woman. She is then revealed by the director to be his most devoted admirer, a secret that leaves him staring in disbelief as his mind races to process the revelation. The director's explanation continues, detailing how her passion for his work was so great that she composed a song specifically for the adaptation, practically begging for it to be used. She confirms this with a soft nod, her eyes still shimmering with unshed tears as he stands frozen, the reality of his impact on others finally beginning to sink in. She speaks of how his narrative stirred her soul, bringing her to tears long before they ever met, and how that raw emotion compelled her to start writing. Her sincerity is emphasized by the director, who points out that this is the pinnacle of artistic passion, a song written purely out of love for the source material. He listens, his heart beginning to thrum against his ribs. The director's words are punctuated when she suddenly reaches out and clasps his hands in hers, her gaze intense and filled with genuine warmth. She tells him that his work changed her entire world, leaving him breathless as his heart beats a frantic rhythm. He is frozen in shock as she pulls his hand toward her, pressing it firmly against her chest. She asks with breathless intensity if he can feel the frantic rhythm of her heart, driven by the sheer excitement of their meeting. The sensation is overwhelming, leaving him stammering and wide-eyed at the sudden, intimate proximity. Because of this raw display of emotion, he begins to understand the depth of her sincerity. She looks at him with a gaze full of reverence, explaining that as a fellow writer and creator, she respects him more than anyone else in the world. He realizes they share a common bond, the knowledge of what it truly means to move others through the power of words. In response, he offers his own heartfelt admission, standing before her with newfound resolve. He confesses that it is a profound honor to know that another creator has been so deeply affected by his work, and he returns the sentiment, acknowledging her own impact on him. These words bring a fresh wave of tears to her eyes as she listens, visibly moved. He continues his praise, telling her that her songs possess a fervent heart and a radiance that brings him to tears whenever he hears them. She can only let out a soft, emotional sound as the weight of his respect sinks in. Suddenly, she lunges forward, throwing her arms around him in a crushing embrace. The suddenness of the hug sends a jolt through him, his mind racing as he struggles to process the warmth and the sheer force of her gratitude. While holding him close, she confesses through her tears that she has been dying to meet him for so long. Now that she finally has, being blessed with such kind words from the person she admires most has made her feel an overwhelming sense of happiness. This moment of connection brings back memories of others who have supported her, like Yuri, who accepted her for exactly who she is. She realizes that she is no longer alone in her passion, surrounded by those who truly understand her heart. As the embrace loosens, she looks away, her cheeks flushed with a deep crimson. He stands there, equally moved, and tells her that hearing her praise made him just as happy, insisting that he is the one who should be feeling thankful for her support. He smiles warmly at her, expressing what a great honor it is to have someone who loves his work enough to write songs for it. As he speaks of their mutual luck, she looks up at him with a gaze of pure devotion and softly confesses that she loves him. The intensity of the moment reaches its peak as she reaches up to cradle his face, her eyes locked onto his. In front of the gathered crowd, she calls out to him as her mentor and inspiration, her voice filled with a singular, unwavering focus that leaves him breathless. She leans in and plants a soft kiss on his cheek, leaving him frozen in a state of pure shock as the world seems to stand still around them. Following this bold display, she continues her heartfelt confession, telling him that meeting him has made her realize he is everything she ever needed and more than she ever dreamed of, while the audience erupts in a deafening roar of disbelief. With tears of joy glistening in her eyes, she finally asks the question that leaves the entire arena in stunned silence. She loves him deeply and wants to know if he will go out with her. She waits for an answer as he stands there, his face burning a bright crimson, as the weight of the situation sinks in. This is not only his first time meeting the world-famous superstar, but also the very first confession he has ever received in his life. The spell is broken when the host clears his throat into the microphone, playfully demanding a response from the young author, which causes her to suddenly snap back to reality and hide her face in her hands, mortified by her own impulsiveness. She remains hidden behind her hands while he is completely short-circuited, steam practically rising from his head as he stares blankly into the distance, unable to process the magnitude of what just happened. The host chuckles, noting that such an intense public confession might have been a bit overwhelming for a high school boy. Meanwhile, in the quiet of the first aid room, the idol wakes up with a start, her first instinct being to search for him. Her manager tries to calm her down, explaining that she had collapsed and was brought there to recover, though she seems more amused by the girl's sudden burst of energy. Both women, though in different places, find themselves gripped by the same fluttering sensation in their chests, their hearts racing as they whisper his name to themselves, realizing that their feelings for him have reached a new, undeniable intensity. The Digimus celebration party began with an event no one could have anticipated, a public confession and a kiss from the world-renowned singer, Alyssa, aimed directly at Yuta. He stands amidst the crowd, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief. Squirming with nervous energy, he wonders if this is all just a vivid dream. He hasn't been able to calm down since it happened, the lingering sensation of her soft lips making his face flush a deep crimson. Suddenly, she approaches him, cutting through his daze. Looking ethereal in her ruffled white dress, she has brought a plate of food specifically for him. She gently urges him to eat, her sudden proximity causing him to jump in startled surprise. He manages to stammer out a word of thanks, overwhelmed by her thoughtfulness. She simply smiles, her expression warm and inviting, as she dismisses his gratitude, insisting that the gesture was nothing at all. As she turns slightly, his heart begins to pound against his ribs once more. The sight of her profile and the memory of her lips, so close just moments ago, sends a fresh wave of panic through him. He finds himself getting increasingly nervous in her presence. The lavish spread at the high-class hotel is truly impressive. Every dish looks exquisite, and the quality of the food certainly lives up to the prestige of the venue. He steals a quiet glance at her while she enjoys her meal. Up close, her beauty is even more striking, her features delicate and refined. He remembers hearing that she has British heritage, which only adds to her captivating and unique appearance. She catches him looking and decides to be even more forward. With a playful glint in her eyes, she picks up a piece of meat and offers to feed him herself. The sheer intimacy of the act leaves him stunned, his mind racing to process the situation. He frantically waves his hands in protest, his face burning with embarrassment. He stammers that such a gesture is far too much of an honor and that he is perfectly capable of feeding himself. Despite his flustered state, she remains undeterred, gently telling him that there's no need for such restraint. He watches as she casts her gaze downward, her expression clouding with a feigned insecurity as she asks if she simply isn't good enough for him. This sudden vulnerability catches him off guard, and he frantically denies it, unable to resist the manipulative charm of her pleading eyes while she delights in his reaction. Seeing his resolve crumble, she leans in even closer, her voice a sultry whisper as she asks if he enjoyed the taste of her lips as much as the food he is currently eating. The sheer intensity of her proximity sends his heart into a frantic rhythm, leaving him breathless and desperate for a moment of reprieve from her overwhelming presence as he tries to excuse himself. Just as the pressure becomes unbearable, a familiar voice cuts through the tension as Yuri approaches, her face lighting up with genuine relief and joy at seeing him again. In response to the newcomer, she tightens her grip on his arm, pressing herself against him in a silent but firm display of possession that he hopes goes unnoticed by the young idol. Before a real conversation can start, she abruptly steers him away toward the buffet, claiming the other dishes look far too tempting to ignore and effectively cutting Yuri off. They leave a stunned silence in their wake, with the young idol watching them go, her request for a private word hanging awkwardly in the air as she tries to keep up. He can only offer a confused glance back as he is hauled away, leaving the girl standing there, struggling to find the right moment to speak her mind. Despite the interruption, she manages to convey her deep gratitude, explaining how his work on Digimas gave her the courage she needed, leaving him stunned by her sudden, formal sincerity. She continues her heartfelt confession, explaining that in her darkest moments, his creations were the light that always managed to cheer her up. The young author stands frozen, his cheeks flushing as the weight of her sincerity hits him, while the blonde woman in the background watches with a look of growing irritation. Overcome with emotion, she reaches out and clasps his hands firmly in hers, a radiant smile breaking across her face. He can only stare in stunned silence, feeling the warmth of her gratitude through the touch as she beams at him with closed eyes. Seeing the pure, honest expression on her face, he feels a surge of quiet joy, realizing that continuing his work was the right choice after all. She tells him that she has long awaited this day, wanting nothing more than to thank him from the bottom of her heart for the inspiration he provided. Her eyes begin to shimmer with unshed tears as she blushes deeply, the intensity of the moment nearly overwhelming her. He quickly tries to compose himself, wiping at his own eyes while insisting that he is the one who should be grateful to her for finding meaning and enjoyment in his stories. Suddenly, the emotional weight causes her to stumble forward, her body pressing against his in an accidental embrace that leaves them both breathless. Nearby, the blonde woman watches the display with a look of horror and indignation, her composure finally snapping as she witnesses the physical contact. Flustered by the sudden closeness, she begins to stammer, her face turning a bright crimson as she addresses him with a level of familiarity that catches him off guard. Behind them, the air grows heavy with a palpable sense of dread as the other woman's jealousy reaches a boiling point, her shadow looming over the pair. Unable to contain herself any longer, the blonde socialite lunges forward and physically shoves herself between the two, forcing them apart with a sharp, territorial glare. She demands to know who this newcomer thinks she is to be so bold with him, her voice dripping with venomous possessiveness. She watches with satisfaction as the young idol backs away, startled by the sudden aggression and apologizing profusely for any perceived slight. The young man tries to de-escalate the situation, but his words are drowned out by the blonde's firm grip on his arm as she refuses to let him go. She bows low in a gesture of humility, promising to be more mindful of her manners in the future despite her obvious confusion. The blonde woman merely scoffs, looking down her nose at the display of submission, while the boy caught in the middle can only watch in helpless frustration as the tension escalates. She can only stare in disbelief as the blonde woman makes a shocking declaration, claiming him as her boyfriend in front of everyone. The announcement leaves both the young author and the idol in a state of total shock, the tension between the two women manifesting as a clash of primal forces in the air around them. She stands there with a triumphant air, her bold claim hanging in the air like a challenge. Yuri can hardly believe her ears, stammering out a question about their relationship status, while Yuta is internally reeling, certain he never agreed to such a thing. Seeing the confusion, the blonde girl doubles down with a smug grin, asserting her claim as fact. Yuta frantically shakes his head in denial, but she simply leans in, whispering for him to trust her, leaving Yuri to process the sudden revelation with a mix of shock and dawning relief. This relief manifests as a soft sigh, a weight seemingly lifting from Yuri's shoulders. When Yuta asks why she seems so comforted by the news, she quickly brushes it off, claiming it's nothing for him to worry about. Her easy acceptance, however, is not the reaction the blonde had hoped for. Instead of the jealousy she intended to provoke, she is met with a calm smile, causing her to puff out her cheeks in a silent, frustrated pout. Determined to reassert her dominance, she shifts her tactics, demanding that Yuta drop the formal titles and call her by her first name. He hesitates, the request catching him off guard in the middle of the crowded room. She doesn't give him room to breathe, pressing closer and insisting that Alyssa is the only name he should use. The proximity is overwhelming, leaving him flustered and unable to find his voice. Watching the display, Yuri can't help but smile, her expression one of genuine happiness for what she perceives as a blossoming romance. This only serves to deepen the blonde's irritation, as her attempts at provocation continue to miss their mark. Despite the lack of the desired effect, she maintains her grip on him, her possessiveness on full display for everyone at the party. Yuta can only endure the attention, his face flushed with embarrassment. The evening eventually culminates in a commemorative photograph, capturing the three of them together. Yuta stands at the center, flanked by the two women who have turned his quiet life into a whirlwind of public spectacle and private confusion. As the flash fades, he reflects on the strange turn of events. What began as a simple moment of gratitude has spiraled into a complex web of public declarations and misunderstood feelings, leaving him more uncertain than ever about the path ahead. He feels a nagging sensation in the back of his mind, a fleeting thought that he has overlooked something crucial. While nearby, his father wanders through the event hall in a state of visible distress, calling out for him and Yuri after becoming separated in the crowd. While the frantic search continues at the party, Michiru remains in her own world, lounging comfortably on her bed. She is initially lost in a state of quiet relaxation, completely unaware of the social media storm brewing on her phone screen. Her heart begins to pound as she sits up, her eyes widening at a post from a voice actress attending the Dijima celebration. The post excitedly details meeting the elusive author, Kamamatsu-sama, and features a photo of the group. Despite a star sticker obscuring the boy's face, she recognizes the familiar silhouette and posture instantly, realizing with a shock that it is Yuta. Yuri sits alone in the dim light of her room, the screen of her phone casting a soft glow on her face as she contemplates the profound impact the story of Digimus has had on her life. For her, the narrative was more than just entertainment. It was a lifeline during the most isolating periods of her youth, particularly after the loss of her mother and her father's relocation for work. The emotional resonance of the work was so strong that she often felt as though the author was speaking directly to her soul, providing the comfort she desperately needed. She finds herself drifting into a hazy memory, a fragment of the past that had long been buried. It was the first time a creative work had truly moved her, though a faint, even older recollection suggests there might have been another significant encounter she can no longer clearly recall. In this ethereal vision, two young figures seem to float through a vast, shimmering expanse. She acknowledges that Digimus has been her unwavering support system, and she has come to view its creator, Kamamatsu-sensei, as her personal savior, leading her to a fierce determination to protect his reputation from any insult. Meanwhile, the morning sun bathes the school grounds in light as students begin their daily routines. Among the crowd, a young man moves with a sense of ease, no longer burdened by the need to maintain the facade he once relied on to navigate his social life. He is soon joined by Michiru, who greets him with a casual familiarity as they walk through the lockers. He returns the greeting with a small smile, their easy rapport suggesting a long-standing friendship that remains unchanged by the recent revelations surrounding his identity. Across the hall, Yuri is paralyzed by a sudden, overwhelming realization, her heart thumping loudly in her chest as his previous words replay in her mind. The shock of him claiming to be the author of her favorite series leaves her completely flustered, and she stammers an apology when she realizes she's been staring, her thoughts a chaotic whirl of disbelief and confusion. The young man, seemingly oblivious to her distress, continues his light-hearted exchange with his companion. He dismisses his earlier intensity as a mere habit, offering to talk whenever she needs, his demeanor relaxed and unbothered by the weight of the secret he carries. Observing this from the shadows, Yuri feels a surge of irritation at his apparent lack of concern. She finds it maddening that he can act so nonchalant after her rejection, and she watches with gritted teeth as he walks away, seemingly without a care in the world while she is left to grapple with the truth. She eventually intercepts him, her frustration boiling over as she demands to know why he looks so haggard and blames him for her own emotional state. He, however, is at his breaking point, his mind clouded by the sheer weight of his recent revelations and the exhaustion of overthinking, leaving him barely able to stand as he tries to brush off her concern. He brushes her off with a sharp dismissal, his voice strained by the weight of his exhaustion. Yuri stands frozen, her mind racing as she tries to rationalize the impossible. She desperately needs proof that he isn't the legendary author, blaming her own lack of sleep for these wild suspicions. As he trudges through the school hallway, his thoughts are far from the drama of the previous night, focused instead on the mundane necessity of finding someone's homework to copy before class begins. The classroom is a cacophony of morning chatter, a stark contrast to his internal fatigue. He settles into his seat, barely acknowledging the casual exchanges around him as students trade favors and notes. Watching him from a distance, Michiru feels a nagging need to uncover the truth behind his recent activities, specifically his visit to Yuri's home. She approaches his desk with a feigned casualness, catching him off guard with a question about his whereabouts over the weekend, while Yuri watches the exchange with bated breath. She continues her line of questioning, her mind weaving together a complex web of theories involving the Digimus party and the suit he was seen wearing. She posits that his presence there was merely a byproduct of his father's professional connections, finally asking if he managed to make any friends during the event. A genuine, radiant smile breaks across his face as he confirms that he did, indeed, make friends. The sight of his uncharacteristic happiness strikes Michiru like a physical blow, leaving her stunned and questioning the source of such a joyful expression. The realization that he found such joy in meeting Yuri and Alyssa causes her to grit her teeth in a sudden surge of resentment. She struggles to process why his happiness feels like a personal affront, her composure beginning to crumble. Feeling a sharp sting of jealousy she can't quite name, she abruptly ends the conversation with a dismissive remark. Nearby, Yuri watches the interaction with a mix of annoyance and confusion, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. He looks up at her, his brow furrowed as he notices the sudden change in her demeanor. The silence between them grows heavy as he tries to gauge the reason for her obvious distress. When he finally asks if she is upset, she snaps at him with a defensive outburst, claiming she doesn't even know why herself. She turns away, leaving him bewildered by her volatile reaction as the school day continues around them. She watches him closely, her eyes narrowing as he fumbles with his phone, realizing he forgot to silence it. When a message notification lights up his screen, his face softens into a genuine smile, a sight that clearly unsettles her. She begins to speculate, her mind racing through the possibilities of who could be contacting him during school hours, especially since it's unlikely to be his family. Because of his obvious delight, her frustration mounts, her grip tightening on her pen until her knuckles turn white. She watches him type a reply with a carefree attitude, his laughter echoing in the quiet classroom. The sound of his enjoyment acts as a catalyst for her growing irritation, making it impossible for her to focus on her work. The sight of his joy feels like a physical sting, a sharp contrast to the turmoil brewing within her. As he continues to chuckle at the screen, oblivious to her gaze, a sense of exclusion washes over her, manifesting as a flicker of hurt in her eyes. In a sudden, impulsive blur of motion, she lunges forward and snatches the device right out of his hands. He is left startled and speechless, his hands still frozen in the air where his phone had been just a second before, as she shouts for him to stop. He looks up at her, completely bewildered by the sudden outburst, and asks if something is wrong. She stands over him, her chest heaving as she struggles to find the words to justify her actions, her face a mask of defensive anger. A wave of intense heat floods her cheeks as the reality of her behavior sinks in. She stands there, phone clutched to her chest, paralyzed by the realization that she acted out of pure, unadulterated jealousy, unable to bear the thought of him talking to other girls. The sharp chime of the school bell cuts through the tension, signaling the start of homeroom. Panicked, she shoves the phone back into his hands with a huff, turning away to hide her flaming face as he tries to process the bizarre encounter. Moments later, as the teacher enters and the rest of the class settles into their seats, she slumps at her desk, her head resting on her hand. The adrenaline has faded, leaving only a heavy sense of embarrassment and the nagging question of why she let her emotions get the better of her. Later, while standing by the sinks, she remains lost in thought, the image of his happy expression haunting her. The realization that he could be so genuinely happy because of someone else leaves her feeling hollow, a feeling so profound that she barely hears her friends calling out to her. Her companions eventually catch up, their voices bright and full of excitement as they propose starting their own video channel. They look to her, praising her beauty and suggesting she would be the perfect face for their new venture, completely unaware of the emotional storm she is weathering. She brushes off her friends' persistent requests to join their social media channel, citing her agency's restrictions and her own busy schedule as reasons to decline. As she walks away, her classmates whisper about her unusual behavior, but she remains focused on her internal mission. She cannot let a single detail about Yuta escape her notice. Walking down the school corridor, she overhears their continued gossip about her social standing and the company she keeps. The conversation takes a sharper turn as they mock Yuta's appearance and lack of social standing, dismissing him as a loner with no redeeming qualities. This blatant disrespect is too much for her to bear, and she whirls around to snap at them, declaring that only she has the right to criticize her childhood friend. Her sudden, fierce loyalty leaves the group in awe, their mockery turning into playful admiration for her protective nature. Later, in the quiet of the classroom, the teacher's lecture on grammar provides a backdrop for the simmering tension between the two students. Yuta senses a gaze upon him and turns slightly, catching her quickly hiding behind her textbook as she tries to maintain her surveillance. His attention is suddenly diverted by a bright flash from his desk, where a message from Alyssa pops up, expressing her excitement for their meeting later that evening. He can't hide his joy at the prospect of tea with a friend, unaware that she is still watching him intently, her curiosity piqued by the cheerful sticker on his screen. He watches in shock as a sharp thwack echoes through the classroom. The teacher's rolled-up lesson plan connecting with the top of the girl's head. The instructor's voice booms, accusing her of being distracted and flirting during the lecture. While the surrounding students whisper and snicker at the sudden outburst, she clutches her head in pain, her face flushed with embarrassment. Seeing her distress, he leans over to whisper a quiet inquiry about her well-being, but his concern is met with a low, frustrated growl. The teacher's sharp gaze snaps back to them, barking a final warning against any further disruptions and telling her to stop talking to herself. As the rest of the class erupts into laughter at the misunderstanding, she sinks into her seat, radiating a palpable aura of irritation. He turns his attention back to the glowing screen on his desk, where a message from Alyssa remains a silent distraction. Beside him, his childhood friend continues to nurse her bruised ego and head, muttering under her breath that the entire ordeal is somehow his fault. When the final bell chime finally signals the end of the day, he makes his way toward the lockers, still puzzled by her erratic behavior throughout the afternoon. The usual bustle of students heading home fills the hallways, yet his thoughts remain fixed on the strange tension that had permeated the classroom. He is surprised to find her still lingering near the entrance, as she typically vanishes the moment lessons conclude. When he asks if she is heading home, she confirms her intent but mentions having other plans after dropping off her belongings, her expression uncharacteristically guarded. To his utter astonishment, she then asks if they might walk home together, a request that feels like a relic from a distant past. As he stands frozen in confusion, she quickly adds a mumbled justification about it being part of an investigation, though the blush on her cheeks suggests a deeper, unspoken motive. He readily agrees, a small smile tugging at his lips as they begin their trek away from the school grounds. Despite the friction of recent days, a sense of relief washes over him at the prospect of restoring some semblance of their old bond. He reflects on the enduring nature of their friendship, acknowledging that while her rejections have been harsh, her importance in his life remains unchanged. He attempts to bridge the silence with a question, but the words catch in his throat as she suddenly shifts her position. The young man is caught completely off guard when she suddenly presses close against his side, her proximity so intimate that he can feel the heat radiating from her. While he stammers a confused protest about her being too close, she simply tells him to ignore it, leaving a nearby classmate to watch the scene in stunned disbelief. The rhythmic sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway as the two companions walked together. For the young man, the simple act of walking home with his childhood friend felt like a nostalgic return to the good old days. As they moved closer, he became acutely aware of the soft sensation of her arm brushing against his, accompanied by a delicate, flowery aroma that seemed to waft through the air. His intense gaze did not go unnoticed, however, as she turned to him with a look of suspicion, questioning why he was staring and noting that he seemed far from his usual self. Despite the awkwardness, they began to ascend the stairs, where she repeatedly urged him to watch his step. He found her sudden concern puzzling, wondering why she was being so insistent about something so mundane. But the warning came too late for her. With a sudden gasp, she lost her footing and began to tumble backward. He reacted instinctively, shouting a warning and lunging forward to catch her, but the momentum of her fall pulled them both down. The two of them landed on the floor with a heavy thud, a chaotic tangle of limbs and school bags. Once the initial shock passed, he quickly checked to see if she was hurt, and she breathlessly assured him that she was all right as they both struggled to sit up. However, as he looked up, he found himself in an incredibly compromising position, staring directly up at her from the floor. The realization of what he was seeing caused him to stammer her name in shock, while she, still dazed, politely asked him to move so she could stand. The realization finally dawned on her, and her face erupted into a deep crimson flush as she realized the view he had just been afforded. She glared at him with pure embarrassment, shouting for him not to look, while he desperately tried to explain that it was an accident, even clumsily bringing up their shared childhood baths to justify his lack of ill intent. This attempt at an excuse only fueled her fire. She screamed at him to shut up, calling him an idiot as she scrambled away. He tried one last time to defuse the situation, mentioning that he had seen her wearing stripes many times in the past, which only served to deepen her mortification. With a huff of indignation, she turned her back on him, marching down the corridor with a stubborn pout. He followed closely behind, offering a sincere apology for the mishap as they tried to move past the embarrassing incident. She notices a figure by the school gate, her eyes widening in surprise. Beside her, Yuta checks his phone, seeing a message from Alyssa stating she is waiting for him. Because of the imposing figure blocking their path, she urges Yuta to leave quickly, intimidated by the tall man in sunglasses who looms over them. The man bows deeply, introducing himself as Ukawa, Lady Alyssa's personal assistant, and explains he has come to collect Yuta. He then leads the two students toward a waiting vehicle parked just outside the school grounds. A luxurious limousine awaits them, and as the window slides down, Alyssa reveals herself, gracefully inviting Yuta to join her for the ride. She further suggests that if the girl with him is his girlfriend, she would be happy to drive her home as well, a comment that sends Akane into a spiral of embarrassment. Offended and flustered by the assumption, she shouts a refusal and sprints away, leaving Yuta to apologize for her sudden departure. With the other girl gone, Alyssa turns her full attention back to him, suggesting they head straight to her house. As the limousine pulls away, she watches from a distance, her heart racing as she wonders just how close the two of them have become. Her internal monologue is interrupted when two members of the basketball club approach, questioning her presence there while she tries to regain her composure. She remains silent, her expression clouded with a mix of frustration and envy as the boys from the basketball club gossip nearby. They laugh about how Ukawa's cold demeanor is actually quite appealing, while she can only stew in her own thoughts about the situation. Meanwhile, Yuta finds himself standing in the middle of an incredibly lavish apartment, his eyes wide with disbelief. The sheer scale and elegance of the living space leave him breathless, forcing him to admit aloud just how fancy the residence truly is. As he takes in the view of the city, which looks like a miniature model from this height, Alyssa approaches with a tray. She invites him to make himself at home and presents him with a freshly made cup of coffee, though he still struggles to process the reality of his surroundings. He takes a tentative sip, surprised to find that the brew isn't bitter at all. Sitting across from such a striking beauty in her own home, he can't help but feel out of place, wondering if even the coffee beans were as expensive as the view. His heart begins to race when she leans in closer, the proximity making him acutely aware of her presence and the fit of her sweater. Stuttering through his panic, he tries to steer the conversation toward her obvious wealth and fame. They settle into a more relaxed conversation about their personal lives and how they manage their finances. She explains that her mother handles most of her affairs, while he admits that his own situation is far more modest. When the topic shifts to his parents, he reveals that he actually lives entirely on his own. This admission seems to pique her interest, leading her to lean in with a whisper, confessing a slight sense of jealousy at his independence. The atmosphere grows more serious as she mentions that her own family situation is quite complicated, with her assistant being her primary visitor. Setting her glass down, she looks him in the eye and prepares to make what she describes as a rather bold request. He braces himself, his mind racing with scandalous possibilities, only to be caught completely off guard. With a blush and a shy gesture, she asks if he would be willing to give her his autograph, something she had been too hesitant to ask for before. Upon hearing his enthusiastic agreement, her face lights up with pure, unadulterated joy. She clasps her hands together, her eyes sparkling as she celebrates this small but significant victory. She watches intently as he deftly signs the cover of a digital master's book. Impressed by his speed, she remarks on his efficiency, to which he casually replies that signing thousands of copies for every new release has made it second nature. Clutching the book to her chest with a deep blush, she declares she will treasure it forever. Seeing her genuine joy, he feels a sense of warmth, admitting it's heartening to see someone so happy to receive his signature. Emboldened by the moment, he asks if he might have her autograph in return. This request catches her off guard, but she quickly agrees, though she notes she has nothing formal to sign. He assures her a simple sheet of paper is more than enough, and she prepares to write. As she carefully pens her name, she confesses that this is a first for her, as she typically avoids giving autographs due to her social anxiety. He is struck by the contrast between her current shyness and her stage presence, wondering how she manages to perform in front of crowds. She explains that the stage is different. Once she begins to sing, she loses herself in the music and the world around her fades away. He then shifts the conversation to a recent celebration party, curious if the social pressure there was difficult for her. She admits the event was for a project so significant she couldn't possibly miss it, adding with a soft look that had she not attended, their paths might never have crossed. On the table sits her copy of the digital master's book, its first edition label still intact, but its edges worn thin from years of dedicated reading, a silent testament to her deep affection for the work. He offers his sincere thanks, telling her that he treasures her music above all else. She responds with a gentle, knowing smile, the atmosphere between them growing increasingly intimate. The quiet moment is shattered when she accidentally fumbles her glass, sending a dark liquid splashing across her sweater. Drenched and mortified, she stands frozen as he frantically tries to help. In the heat of the embarrassment and the sudden chaos, she suggests she needs to change, and then, with a dazed expression, asks if he would like to join her in the shower. Yuta's heart races as Alyssa makes a bold, teasing suggestion about joining her in the shower. He stammers in disbelief, his face flushing a deep red, while she simply giggles at his reaction. After the joke lands, she encourages him to make himself at home and explore the apartment while she finishes up. Standing alone in the spacious living area, he feels a pang of guilt, wondering if it's truly right to wander through a woman's private residence. Despite his hesitation, his curiosity begins to get the better of him as he glances around the elegantly decorated space. He wanders down a long, brightly lit hallway, marveling at the sheer scale of the place. Noticing a door left slightly ajar, he decides a quick peek wouldn't hurt, rationalizing that this is a rare opportunity to see how a famous singer lives. Stepping inside, he finds himself in a dedicated music studio, filled with instruments and recording equipment. The floor is practically carpeted with discarded sheets of music, a testament to the creative process unfolding within these soundproof walls. He picks up a few pages, struck by the sheer volume of work required to compose a single song. His admiration for her dedication grows, but the quiet moment is shattered when her voice rings out, calling his name from just outside the room. The door bursts open with a sudden bang as she rushes in, clad only in a white towel and looking completely frantic. She shouts an apology, clearly desperate to find something, while he stands frozen in shock at her sudden, scantily clad appearance. He immediately drops to the floor, averting his gaze as she realizes the compromising situation they've both stumbled into. She begs him not to look, her own face turning a bright shade of crimson as the embarrassment of the moment sinks in. As he stammers out an apology, insisting he didn't mean to intrude or stare, she suddenly realizes the precarious state of her only covering. The towel begins to slide, and his attempts to explain himself only add to the chaotic tension filling the small room. In a final, disastrous turn of events, the towel slips away entirely, leaving her completely exposed. He can only stare in wide-eyed, paralyzed shock, while she stands there, her expression a mix of mortification and a strange, quiet realization. She stands frozen, her face a deep crimson as the towel lies forgotten on the floor. Yuta, his own face burning, scrambles backward, shouting apologies and his intent to leave immediately. Outside the room, his heart hammers against his ribs with a deafening rhythm. The image of her stunning, unclothed form is seared into his mind, leaving him breathless and reeling from the shock. He pauses, a sudden realization cooling his panic. When she had warned him not to look earlier, she must have been referring to the private music studio he had stumbled upon, not herself. Moments later, she has composed herself and changed into a crisp white shirt. She bows deeply before him, her voice trembling as she offers a sincere apology for the chaotic encounter. They sit together on the sofa, the air thick with lingering tension. When she mentions her unsightly body, he impulsively counters that it was actually quite pleasant, only to immediately realize the weight of his words and descend into a fresh wave of panic. She hides her face, her blush deepening as she begs him to stop, the situation becoming almost too embarrassing to bear. He can only stammer out another apology, his own face matching the heat of hers. A heavy silence falls between them, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Finally, he breaks the quiet, offering a formal apology for intruding into her private studio without permission. She looks down, her expression softening as she takes the blame upon herself. She admits that if she truly hadn't wanted him to see it, she should have put her work away, especially after giving him leave to explore her home. Shifting the focus to the work at hand, they look over the sheet music together. She reveals that she has been commissioned to write the opening theme for the second season of the popular series Digimus, much to his surprise. He questions why she is starting so early, given the project was only recently announced. She explains with a quiet intensity that crafting a song is a long, arduous process for her, requiring every bit of time she can spare. She had gone through countless iterations, a mountain of discarded drafts that now lay scattered before him. He looked at the sheer volume of work with wide-eyed realization, finally grasping the depth of her dedication to her craft. Because she believed songs were meant to embellish the core of a story, she explained that she refused to settle for anything less than perfection. He sat beside her, genuinely moved by the immense effort she poured into every single note, expressing his deep admiration for her work ethic. This admission of vulnerability caused her to hide her face in her hands, letting out a frustrated cry of embarrassment. She found the idea of showing him her unfinished, disgraceful work to be utterly humiliating, while he could only offer a nervous, comforting laugh to ease her distress. As the tension began to ebb, she looked away, her expression still clouded by a lingering sense of self-consciousness. He tried to bridge the gap, assuring her that he understood her feelings, though she remained skeptical of how easily he accepted her flaws. He continued, his voice bright with sincerity, telling her how happy he was to have been granted even a small glimpse into her private creative world. She sat at her keyboard, listening intently as he spoke of his appreciation for the chance to see her in her element. The young man's words struck a chord, making her feel an unexpected sense of intimacy that sent a flush creeping across her cheeks. When he eagerly asked if he could finally hear the song, she hesitated for a heartbeat before softly agreeing to perform it for him, her heart thumping in her chest. With a deep breath, her fingers began to dance across the keys, filling the room with a complex and driving melody. The music flowed from her with a raw intensity, a testament to the hours of labor he had seen reflected in her discarded notes. While she played, he stood transfixed, the powerful sound washing over him and bringing the vibrant world of the anime to life in his mind. Every note felt deliberate and charged with emotion, leaving him completely awestruck by the sheer scale of her talent. As the final chord resonated and faded, he erupted into enthusiastic applause, his praise echoing through the studio. She sat back, the physical and emotional toll of the performance visible in her quiet, composed posture as she thanked him for his support. Following the performance, she confessed that a significant hurdle remained. She had been unable to come up with any suitable lyrics. He looked on thoughtfully, realizing that while the music was a masterpiece, the heart of the song was still waiting to be found. She sat quietly by the piano, her gaze fixed on the floor as she confessed the weight of her responsibility. To her, the music would be hollow without the foundation of his work, and she felt a desperate need to create something that could stand proudly alongside his creation. Looking up with a somber expression, she apologized for dampening the spirit of their meeting with her personal struggles. She felt it was presumptuous to burden him, especially since both the audience and the creator himself deserved nothing but the best. He watched her, his heart heavy with the realization of how much passion she poured into this project for his sake. Clenching his fist in a moment of silent resolve, he finally spoke up, asking if there was any way he could assist her, suggesting that as the author, they could brainstorm the lyrics together. This offer caught her completely off guard, her eyes widening in disbelief as she asked if he truly meant it. With a warm, reassuring smile, he confirmed that he would be more than happy to help, provided she was comfortable with the arrangement. Overwhelmed by his kindness, she began to weep, the tears streaming down her face as she struggled to process the depth of his support. She repeated the word comrades under her breath, a term that seemed to resonate deeply within her as she realized she wasn't alone in this endeavor. He leaned in with newfound energy, declaring that they were indeed comrades with a shared vision and should help each other without worrying about social hierarchies. He even insisted that she drop the formal honorifics, wanting them to stand on equal ground as they worked toward their common goal. The weight of his words seemed to break something inside her, and after a moment of trembling silence, she suddenly lunged forward. Before he could react, she threw herself at him with a force that nearly knocked him off his feet. She clung to him desperately, burying her face against him as she muffled her cries of gratitude. He was left breathless, both from the sudden impact and the overwhelming scent of her, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the sudden, intense physical contact. Pulling back just enough to look him in the eye, her face was a mask of tears and joy as she reaffirmed their partnership. He could only nod in agreement, his own expression softening as they committed to doing their absolute best together. Later that night, in the quiet of her own room, Akane sat hunched over her phone, scrolling through the latest updates and reader comments. Seeing the praise for the author and the excitement for the new chapter only seemed to deepen the sense of unease and loneliness she felt, a stark contrast to the connection forged earlier that day. Akane is alone in her room, dressed in her striped pajamas, wrestling with a troubling thought. She compares recent events to the mysterious Kamamatsu-sama, her mind racing as she tries to reconcile the possibility that Yuta could be him. She flails on her bed in a fit of denial, shouting to the empty room that it's all just a massive coincidence, and there's no way he could be the person she admires. Her internal turmoil is abruptly cut short by the sharp chime of the doorbell. Startled by the unexpected sound at such a late hour, she loses her balance and tumbles off the bed with a loud thud, wondering who could possibly be visiting her now. She cautiously approaches the door, grumbling about the inconvenience of unannounced visitors. Peering through the peephole, her eyes widen in pure shock as she recognizes the boy standing in the hallway. It is Yuta, and his presence is the last thing she expected. Opening the door, she finds him looking somewhat sheepish about the late hour. He apologizes for the intrusion, explaining that he was asked to deliver something to her, which only deepens her confusion. He holds out a small gift bag, clarifying that Nekawa-san had requested he pass it along. She stares at the bag, her mind still trying to process the sudden appearance of the boy she was just obsessing over. The situation becomes even more surreal when she notices the towering figure of Ukawa standing silently behind him. Yuta explains that the man felt bad for frightening her earlier and insisted on offering this high-end Gikuro tea as a formal apology. Though hesitant, she finds herself accepting the gift. Suddenly, a wave of self-consciousness hits her. She realizes she is standing there having a perfectly mundane conversation with him, completely forgetting her suspicion. She scolds herself internally, knowing she needs to stay focused on her mission. Seizing the opportunity, she invites him inside for a bit, her expression shifting to one of calculated intent. While he seems surprised by the sudden invitation, she views this as the perfect chance to gather the evidence she needs to prove he isn't who she thinks he is. He agrees to the visit, and as they step inside, she mentally prepares herself for the task ahead. Donning an imaginary detective's cap, she declares the start of her investigation, determined to uncover the truth behind his identity. She stands in her kitchen area, offering a small apology for the awkwardness earlier in the day. He sits at the low table, dismissing her concerns with a gentle wave of his hand, insisting that he didn't mind at all. Moving closer, she leans in with a focused gaze, asking for his impression of the time spent with Alyssa. He takes a moment to reflect, concluding that everything seemed perfectly normal and that the girl didn't act out of character. Not satisfied with such a brief answer, she pushes for more specifics about their outing. He simply shrugs, explaining that they did nothing more than share a cup of coffee, a detail that seems to catch her off guard. He continues, his face lighting up as he describes how surprisingly fulfilling it was to spend time with a friend. This display of genuine happiness causes her to grip her glass tightly, her frustration mounting until she slams a fresh cup of tea onto the table. Amidst her obvious irritation, he mentions that he already has plans to meet another friend named Kawasaki this coming Saturday. The atmosphere in the room grows heavy as she sits with a deep scowl, her arms crossed tightly. When he tentatively asks if something is wrong or if she is angry, she snaps back a denial that is betrayed by her furious expression. Underneath the table, her legs shake uncontrollably as she grapples with a sudden, inexplicable surge of jealousy. He watches her with concern, noting that she is acting quite strange, while she internally screams that she is definitely not some maiden in love. She demands to know the exact time of his meeting, her eyes narrowing into a sharp glare. He answers honestly, stating it is set for 10 in the morning, unaware of the storm brewing in her mind. After he finally departs for the night, she stands alone by the door, her thoughts a whirlwind of agitation. She realizes that seeing his cheerful face after spending time with others is more than she can bear, and she resolves to follow him the next day to see the truth for herself. Saturday arrives, and the area around Kawasaki Station is teeming with the usual weekend crowd. The air is thick with the sound of commuters and shoppers as the appointed time approaches. Standing amidst the bustle, he checks his phone, his heart racing as he reads a message from Yuri. He feels a mix of anticipation and anxiety, wondering if this meeting truly qualifies as a date as he waits for her to arrive. He stands amidst the bustling crowd of the station when a familiar voice calls his name, drawing his attention to a girl approaching from behind. He is momentarily breathless as she catches up. Despite her clever disguise of a cap and glasses, her natural elegance remains unmistakable as she offers a cheerful apology for arriving precisely at 10 o'clock. She stops and bows deeply before they can even begin their day, surprising him with her sudden formality as she explains her need to apologize for her behavior during their previous encounter. She continues, her expression softening as she admits that her competitive attitude toward Alyssa at the party might have been troublesome, worrying that her intensity made him feel uncomfortable. She is met with a warm, genuine smile as he insists that her presence and the dynamic between them actually made the entire event far more enjoyable for him, his sincerity easing the tension. He watches as she clenches the fabric of her vest, touched by his words, before she declares that they should focus on enjoying their time together today, which brings a blush to his cheeks. She reaches out and firmly grasps his hand without warning, leading him toward their destination while he becomes instantly flustered by the physical contact, questioning if such intimacy is normal. She playfully reveals that he is the first person she has ever gone on a date with as they walk hand in hand toward a large cinema complex, where she mentions her comfort around men is usually limited to her brother. They enter the bustling lobby where he scans the dense crowd of families and couples, feeling a wave of anxiety and second-guessing his choice of a popular movie on a Saturday. He feels her lean in close, her breath warm against his ear as she playfully asks if he thinks they look like a couple to the people passing by, leaving him stunned and crimson-faced. She continues her playful assault, leaning in close as they stand before the cinema's screening schedule. Her proximity sends his heart into a frantic rhythm, his mind racing to process the sudden intimacy while he stammers out a non-committal response about their movie choice. Seeing his hesitation, she takes charge, pointing toward the list of titles and asking if any catch his eye. He wonders if girls usually prefer romances, but before he can settle on a suggestion, she has already made up her mind. With a cheerful exclamation, she dashes toward the ticket counter, leaving him reaching out in a futile attempt to offer payment. As he watches her disappear into the crowd, a prickle of unease washes over him, and he glances back, sensing a pair of eyes watching them from the shadows of the lobby. She returns moments later, triumphantly balancing a massive bucket of popcorn and 2 large drinks. He can only stare in disbelief at the sheer volume of snacks she managed to procure in such a short time, wondering how she plans to finish it all. Without waiting for an answer, she grabs his hand and pulls him toward the theater entrance, her energy seemingly boundless. He finds himself swept along by her enthusiasm, his heart skipping a beat at the firm, warm grip of her fingers interlaced with his. Once settled in the darkened theater, he finds his attention drifting from the screen to the girl beside him, whose eyes are fixed intently on the film. He reflects on how her natural kindness and vibrant spirit have completely bypassed his usual reservations, filling him with a quiet, unexpected sense of happiness. As the credits begin to roll, the silence of the room is broken by a sudden, rhythmic burst of applause from the audience. They join the crowd filing out of the theater, the air still thick with the emotional residue of the story they just witnessed. Later, over drinks at a nearby cafe, she is still visibly moved, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue as she recounts the most touching scenes. She offers a soft apology for her earlier intensity, her voice thick with the lingering emotions of the film. He watches her, a realization dawning on him as he explains that the audience's applause wasn't just for the movie, but a genuine show of appreciation for the hard work of the staff and actors like her. The thought that her talent is being recognized by so many people brings a genuine, warm smile to his face. He gazes at her across the table, struck by the realization that she is not just a talented actress, but a person of immense charm and depth. While a small part of him feels inadequate in the shadow of her brilliance, he finds himself more drawn to her than ever before. He sits across from her, his shoulders slumped as he admits he doesn't feel worthy of being on a date with someone like her. She immediately leans across the table, her face inches from his, and firmly tells him to stop putting himself down. She points out that while he sees her as outgoing, he shouldn't let his own negativity take root, demanding that he cease all negative thoughts immediately. Because of his sudden bashfulness, she continues her lecture with a playful yet stern finger pointed his way. She warns him that if he keeps thinking he's no good, those thoughts will eventually become his reality, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. He can only stare back, caught off guard by the sheer intensity of her conviction. Moments later, she flashes a bright, encouraging smile, insisting that he deserves to have confidence in himself. She jokingly suggests he should adopt a grander persona, like the great Kamamatsu, to boost his ego. He gives a hesitant, blushing nod, swept up in her infectious energy as they sit together in the quiet cafe. Their light-hearted moment is shattered by a sudden, metallic clatter from the next table. Both of them jump, their attention snapping toward a mysterious figure clad in a bucket hat and dark sunglasses who has just caused a scene by dropping their belongings. As the stranger begins to tremble violently, muttering the name Kamamatsu under their breath, the surrounding patrons start to whisper in concern. She and her companion watch with growing unease, wondering if the person is unwell or if they somehow overheard their private conversation. Deciding to intervene, they both stand up and approach the quivering figure. As they get closer, he catches a glimpse of the person's face and gasps in shock, recognizing the stranger as Michiru. Yuta is on a date in Kawasaki with the famous voice actress, Kamigane Yuri. Their outing takes an unexpected turn when they cross paths with a familiar figure at a cafe. He stares in disbelief, as does Yuri, while the person across from them, heavily disguised in a hat and sunglasses, freezes in shock. Without a word of explanation, the mysterious girl shouts that she is perfectly fine and bolts from the cafe, leaving the pair stunned in her wake. He immediately gives chase, calling out to Michiru as she weaves through the crowded mall in a desperate attempt to escape. After catching up, he holds out the mobile phone she dropped in her haste. She attempts to maintain her cover by speaking in broken, nonsensical Japanese, pretending to be a foreigner. Seeing that her disguise has failed, she finally removes her hat and glasses, revealing her true identity just as Akane arrives, drawn by the commotion. He takes a moment to introduce the two, identifying the formerly disguised girl as his childhood friend, Michiru. Akane reacts with excitement to the news of a childhood friend, while Yuri introduces herself with a playful smile, emphasizing her own unique connection to Yuta. Meanwhile, Michiru can only mumble in embarrassment, overwhelmed by the situation. Despite the initial tension, the group decides to stick together. Michiru reluctantly agrees to join them, while Akane and Yuri both express a keen interest in getting to know each other better and asking plenty of questions, setting the stage for a very interesting lunch. She gritted her teeth, frustrated that her disguise had failed so quickly, yet a spark of opportunism flickered in her eyes. This setback could be turned to her advantage. She would use this chance to pry every detail about the mysterious Yuri from the source itself. Leading the way to a nearby cafe, she remained focused on her objective, particularly the cryptic remark about Kamamatsu that Yuri had dropped earlier. The group approached the counter of the small establishment, the air thick with unspoken questions. He carefully balanced a tray laden with drinks and lattes, prompting a grateful exclamation from Yuri, who insisted he didn't need to go to such trouble. They had moved to a different establishment to escape the awkwardness of their previous encounter, but Akane sat slumped at the table, her brow furrowed as she obsessively wondered how he had seen through her supposedly perfect disguise. The young woman reached out to assist him with the heavy tray, noting how difficult it looked to carry alone. This display of helpfulness only served to deepen the scowl on Akane's face, a low growl vibrating in her throat as she watched their easy rapport. She was suddenly pulled from her brooding when a hand extended a drink toward her, Yuri's voice soft as she offered the refreshment. A strange, unsettling sensation washed over Akane, leaving her momentarily speechless and clutching her chest in confusion. He placed her favorite meal before her, a shrimp avocado sandwich and a sugarless cafe au lait, causing her to stammer out a surprise thanks. Yuri marveled at how well he knew her tastes, a comment that earned him a sharp, painful kick to the shin from Akane under the table as she warned him not to let the praise go to his head. The actress watched their bickering with a gentle smile, remarking that they acted just like a couple and admitting a hint of jealousy at their closeness. This casual observation struck Akane like a physical blow, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief. She exploded in a flurry of denial, shouting a demand to know who was being called a couple while delivering another swift kick to his leg. He winced in pain as Yuri chuckled, noting that she and her own companion weren't quite like that. Her face flushed a deep crimson as she told them both to shut up, clearly agitated by the suggestion. Yuri continued to tease her, noting how she always reacted this way, while he sat there bewildered, wondering what he had done to deserve such treatment. The conversation shifted as Yuri inquired about the length of their friendship, watching with interest as Akane began to tremble with a mix of embarrassment and nervous energy. He answered simply, stating they had known each other for their entire lives, a fact that seemed to only heighten the tension and frantic internal panic radiating from the girl beside him. She listens intently as the young man recounts the deep-rooted history between himself and his childhood companion. He describes a life intertwined from the very beginning, born in the same hospital and growing up side by side, a narrative that strikes her as something out of a fairy tale. Leaning in with an invasive curiosity, she corners the disguised girl, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She probes into the nature of their long-standing bond, bluntly asking if such proximity hasn't inevitably led to romantic feelings, leaving her companion flustered and desperate for personal space. A sharp laugh escapes her as she suddenly pivots, dismissing the young man as plain and boring. While he sits there awkwardly, absorbing the blunt critique, she questions why anyone would find such an unremarkable individual interesting. However, her tone shifts again as she admits a personal preference for his type, noting that his kindness and authenticity are rare traits. Beside her, the girl in the bucket hat watches with growing suspicion, her eyes narrowing at the sudden change in demeanor. He offers a humble thanks, clearly flattered by the unexpected praise. This reaction only serves to further irritate his childhood friend, who seethes in silence, her frustration bubbling over at the blatant display of affection happening right before her eyes. The tension reaches a breaking point as the disguised girl slams her drink onto the table, her internal monologue a chaotic mess of annoyance and disbelief. She watches him with a mix of pity and anger, convinced he is being easily manipulated by the older woman's charms. Clenching her fist beneath the table, she struggles to understand the intensity of her own agitation. When the suggestion is made that she might be jealous, she erupts in a flustered denial, while the other woman watches with a knowing, playful smirk. The playful facade drops as the woman in the beret leans forward, her expression turning uncharacteristically grave. She insists that her words are not mere flirtation, asserting with absolute conviction that when she expresses interest in someone, her intentions are entirely sincere. A heavy, rhythmic thumping fills the silence as both the young man and his friend feel their hearts race in response to the sudden intensity. The girl stares at her companion, her mind racing with confusion over why this woman would show such genuine interest in someone she considers so ordinary. Amidst the lingering tension, she retreats into her own thoughts, her gaze fixed on the young man with a new, analytical focus. A secret suspicion takes root in her mind, driving her to uncover whether he is truly the person she suspects him to be, a mystery she is now determined to solve. She politely but firmly requests that he find another seat, explaining that the group needs a moment for some private conversation. He is caught off guard, blinking in confusion, but he eventually gathers his things and moves away, leaving the three of them alone at the table. He complies, allowing her to lean in and bluntly ask her companion if her feelings for the boy are truly sincere. The question catches the girl in the bucket hat completely off guard. She stammers a denial, insisting that her only concern is looking out for him as a longtime friend. She is met with skepticism as the other woman points out that someone with such striking features could easily find a more impressive partner, rather than settling for a seemingly unremarkable loner. In an instant, her defensive instincts kick in, and she firmly counters the claim, asserting that he is far more than he appears to be. Her reaction is met with a surprising admission of respect, as the woman in the beret praises his extraordinary kindness and his habit of always putting others before himself. These words strike a chord with the girl in the hat, who feels a sharp, painful pang of realization as she considers how much she might have taken him for granted. She continues her praise, noting how his storytelling has the power to move countless hearts and has even been adapted into successful films and animations that leave audiences in tears. The revelation leaves her companion stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief as the scale of his hidden life begins to unfold. She reveals her ultimate admiration by declaring him the greatest author of their time, specifically citing his work as the creator of the renowned Digimon series. The weight of this information causes the girl's heart to hammer against her ribs, a deafening thudding that drowns out the noise of the cafe as the truth finally settles in. Her mind races as every piece of the puzzle falls into place, confirming that the boy she has known forever is indeed the legendary figure known to the world as Kamamatsu. There is no denying it now. The sheer magnitude of the secret he has been keeping leaves her reeling. She abruptly stands up, her legs trembling as she begins to stumble away from the table without a word of explanation. Her sudden departure leaves the others staring in confusion, wondering what could have prompted such a frantic and silent exit. She hurries out of the establishment, her movements erratic as she disappears into the street, leaving her friends behind to speculate on her sudden change in demeanor. When he eventually returns to the table, he finds only a lingering sense of unease and an empty seat where his friend had just been sitting. He offers a bright, forgiving smile, assuring his companion that there are no hard feelings even if their friend left so abruptly. Despite his easygoing nature, she can't help but feel a heavy sense of regret, realizing that her probing questions might have stirred up more than she ever intended. She remains calm despite the sudden departure of their companion, assuring Yuta that she will reach out to Michiru later to smooth things over. With the table cleared, she asks what their next move should be. Since she hadn't planned the day this far ahead, she suggests they simply enjoy some window shopping as they stroll through the bustling mall. Meanwhile, the girl who fled sits alone on a bench, her head bowed in a daze. Her silence draws the attention of two loitering boys who attempt to strike up a conversation, but she remains completely unresponsive to their advances. Her heart hammers against her ribs as the reality of the situation finally sinks in. There is no longer any doubt that Yuta is indeed the legendary Kamamatsu. While she grapples with this revelation, her friends continue their outing, with Yuri enthusiastically picking out clothes for Yuta to try on. The weight of her past decisions suddenly crashes down on her, filling her with a frantic energy. She realizes with a jolt of pure agony that she had actually rejected a confession from the very person she has always loved. Overwhelmed by this crushing irony, she begins to flail her limbs in a silent, desperate tantrum, oblivious to the confused stare of a small child standing nearby. Back at the food court, the pair finishes their meal and returns their trays. The encounter with Michiru had been brief and confusing, ending with her sudden flight, but they decide to put the strange event behind them for now. As they continue their walk, a message arrives on Yuta's phone from Michiru, claiming that something urgent came up and apologizing for the sudden exit. Yuri breathes a sigh of relief, glad that their friend doesn't seem to be truly upset. Their path eventually leads them to a bookstore, where she excitedly points out the newest volume of the Digimon's manga. Yuta can only look on with a mix of pride and trepidation, knowing the secret he still carries. Yuta wanders through the aisles of the store, his eyes scanning the shelves as he wonders what is keeping his companion. Just as he begins to worry about the delay, he spots her figure near the back of the shop. He sees her kneeling beside a small, distraught boy who is crying out for his mother. She has a look of gentle concern on her face as she tries to assess the situation and comfort the wailing child. As he draws closer, he hears her reassuring the child, promising that they will find his mother together. He realizes then that her absence was due to this unexpected encounter and her desire to help. She suddenly changes her tone, adopting a bright and encouraging voice as she tells the boy that the goddess of happiness prefers smiles over tears. He is struck by how effectively she uses her voice to soothe the child's fears and bring a smile to his face. Noticing his arrival, she quickly explains that the boy has lost his way and asks if he would mind watching over him while she goes to search for the mother. She seems determined to resolve the situation as quickly as possible. He doesn't hesitate to offer his assistance, insisting on helping with the search instead of staying behind. His sudden enthusiasm brings a blush to her cheeks and a bright smile to her face as she welcomes him to their impromptu team. With the boy's hand in theirs, they set off through the mall, turning the search into a grand adventure to keep the little one's spirits high. The atmosphere shifts from one of distress to one of shared purpose and excitement. It isn't long before they find the boy's mother, who is overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. She offers her heartfelt thanks as the young woman gently reminds the boy to stay brave and stop his crying, having successfully completed their mission. Before saying their final goodbyes, she leans down to make a solemn pinky promise with the boy. Watching the scene unfold, He finds himself deeply impressed by her innate kindness and her ability to bring comfort to those around her, feeling a sense of quiet admiration. He stood beside her as the murmurs began to swell around them. A passerby stopped, eyes widening as they questioned if the voice they just heard belonged to the famous Yuri-tan. Soon, others joined in, whispering about the possibility of a real-life voice actress standing right there in the street. As the realization spread, the crowd began to close in, their excitement palpable. Fans clamored for autographs, their voices a chaotic blend of awe and demand. Yuri looked to him, her expression a mix of panic and uncertainty, while he realized their quiet afternoon was rapidly coming to an end. Without another word, she seized his hand and broke into a sprint, her laughter trailing behind them as they fled the bewildered onlookers. To him, in that moment, she wasn't a distant idol or a famous voice. She was simply a vibrant, energetic girl whose spirit was infectious. Later that evening, the city lights began to glow as they walked together in a much quieter setting. He expressed his gratitude for the day, admitting he felt a bit guilty for dragging her along, yet he couldn't hide the genuine happiness he felt from their time spent together. She turned to him with a soft, sincere smile, reassuring him that she had truly enjoyed herself as well. His heart skipped a beat, and he found himself stammering a quick, flustered response to hide his growing affection. Then, with a hopeful glint in her eyes, she asked if he would be willing to go on another date sometime. He didn't hesitate for a second, his face lighting up with a broad, joyful grin as he confirmed that he would love nothing more. The weekend eventually drew to a close, and the familiar silhouette of the school building loomed under the morning sky. The focus shifted away from the weekend's excitement, returning to the daily routine that awaited. Elsewhere, Akane sat waiting, her eyes glued to her phone screen as a social media post caught her attention. It was a photo of Yuta, captioned with a mention of a fun day out in Kawasaki with a friend. The realization hit her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and reeling. Her mind became a whirlwind of conflicting emotions as she huddled on a bench, tears pricking at her eyes. She grappled with the guilt of her past doubts and the overwhelming weight of her feelings for him, her thoughts racing through a chaotic loop of regret and longing. By the time Monday morning arrived, she stood before the school gates, taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart. She resolved to act naturally, telling herself that knowing his secret shouldn't change their friendship, even as her pulse thundered in her ears with every step she took toward him. She stood waiting outside the gate, her heart likely racing as the door clicked open and he stepped out. He paused, blinking in surprise at her unexpected presence so early in the morning. Fidgeting with her bag, she quickly explained that she was just wondering if they should walk to school together, trying to sound casual despite the blush creeping up her neck. He agreed, though he couldn't help but comment on how unusual the request was, which only made her more defensive as she urged him to just start moving. As they set off, he let out a wide yawn, clearly exhausted from the previous night, while she walked a few paces behind, internally berating herself for being too nervous to even look him in the eye. She tried to maintain her composure, desperately reminding herself that he was far from her ideal type, yet her heart betrayed her with a heavy, rhythmic thumping that she couldn't ignore. When he mentioned that he had been up late working on a new chapter, she found herself admiring the dark circles under his eyes as a sign of his dedication, a thought that immediately sent her into a spiral of self-reproach for finding such a thing attractive. Noticing her flushed face, he leaned in close to ask if she was feeling unwell, his sudden proximity causing her heart to hammer against her ribs as he reached out to check her temperature. The physical contact was too much. She shrieked that she was perfectly fine and bolted down the street, leaving him crouching in confusion at her sudden outburst. She eventually stopped to catch her breath against a utility pole, her mind a whirlwind of embarrassment, while he watched from a distance, wondering if he should have stayed up so late himself if it meant misreading the situation so badly. Clutching her chest, she felt the persistent drum of her heartbeat and questioned why she was reacting this way to someone she claimed not to like. The morning sun bathed the school building in light as the school day began, the usual greetings filling the air despite the unresolved tension between the two childhood friends. Yuta is fast asleep at his desk, oblivious to the lively chatter of his classmates discussing the latest chapter of a popular series. From across the room, Akane watches him with a mix of concern and annoyance, wondering how he can be so careless with his own well-being while others are so full of energy. The sleeping boy remains the center of her thoughts as she reflects on the secret they share. To the rest of the class, he is just a quiet student, but she knows his true identity as the legendary Kamamatsu-sama, a secret he guards closely while constantly putting the needs of others before his own rest. She is suddenly snapped back to reality when a group of her classmates approaches, their presence breaking her deep contemplation. They've noticed her intense gaze directed toward the back of the room and can't help but tease her about being lost in thought while staring at their classmate. The girls playfully suggest that he might actually be her type, much to her visible embarrassment. They compare him to the school's more conventionally attractive boys, like Nakatsugawa, but her frantic denials and deep blush only seem to confirm their suspicions that there's more to her interest than she's letting on. She lets out a long, shaky breath of relief when it seems the conversation has shifted, hoping she managed to hide the true depth of her feelings. She believes she successfully diverted their attention, unaware that her friends are far more observant than she gives them credit for. However, they continue their analysis, pointing out that while she ignores the popular boys, she is quick to jump to Yuta's defense whenever he's teased. This realization hits her like a physical blow, her face turning a bright shade of crimson as she realizes her protective instincts have been far more transparent than she thought. In a desperate attempt to save face, she loudly protests the idea of falling for someone like him, her voice echoing through the classroom. Her outburst is a clumsy shield, meant to deflect the growing realization that her childhood friend might mean more to her than she's willing to admit to herself or anyone else. The girls remain unconvinced, watching her struggle to maintain her composure as she tries to laugh off the situation. Despite her efforts to appear nonchalant, the beads of sweat on her brow and her darting eyes betray the internal turmoil she's experiencing under their collective gaze. Unable to bear the scrutiny any longer, she abruptly stands and bolts from the room under the flimsy excuse of needing the restroom. Her sudden departure leaves her friends stunned, the weight of their teasing finally sinking in as they realize they might have touched a very raw nerve. They watch the door where she vanished, the atmosphere in the group shifting from playful to concerned. One of them suggests that they might have gone too far and should probably apologize later, leaving the classroom in a state of awkward silence as they process her intense reaction. Akane has retreated to the privacy of a bathroom stall, her head buried in her hands as she grapples with the chaotic swirl of her own emotions. She berates herself for her inability to act naturally around Yuta, realizing that her previous denials have only served to highlight how much her heart races whenever he is near. As she clutches her chest, the rhythmic thrum of her heartbeat becomes impossible to ignore. She reflects on how he has always been a constant presence in her life, supporting her not just as a friend, but as the mysterious author who has inspired her for so long. She finds this realization punctuated by a sudden notification on her phone, drawing her gaze to a message from the very person consuming her thoughts. As she looks at the screen, the words of her friends echo in her mind, making her realize that her long-standing bond with him has evolved into something far deeper. She reads the message, which is simple yet thoughtful. He expresses concern for her absence and offers to take notes so she doesn't fall behind. Reading his kind words, a single tear of clarity escapes as she finally admits to herself that she is, without a doubt, in love with him. Overwhelmed by the weight of this confession, she hunches over in the quiet stall, a fierce sense of possessiveness taking hold. She realizes she doesn't want anyone else to take him away, cementing her resolve to keep him for herself. A few days had passed since the confession that changed everything. The weekend arrived, but the air remained heavy with the echoes of their confrontation. Messages flashed on screens, filled with demands for explanations and expressions of frustration, as the world they knew seemed to revolve solely around the fallout of that single, life-altering moment. He sat alone in the dim light of his room, the rhythmic tapping of his keyboard the only sound in the silence. The harsh words she had hurled at him, calling him an idiot and claiming he had always belonged to her, gnawed at his mind. He stopped his work, staring blankly at the screen as the weight of her possessiveness and anger truly began to sink in. Meanwhile, she found herself lost in the labyrinth of her own memories, reflecting on the years they had spent together. She realized with a pang of regret that she couldn't recall a single instance where he hadn't been kind to her. Even when she was cruel or dismissive, he would simply laugh it off, offering his forgiveness without hesitation. She recalled how this unwavering support had been the bedrock of her life since they were children. Whenever things grew difficult or she felt the sting of loneliness, he was there, a constant presence by her side. He prioritized her well-being above all else, worrying about her health, and even taking meticulous notes for her when she was unable to attend class. She held onto the memory of his gentle, unassuming smile, a kindness that she believed had always been hers alone. She sits alone, hunched over and lost in a whirlwind of doubt. The weight of her recent actions presses down on her as she questions what her next move should be. Memories of the other women who have entered his life flicker through her mind, a painful reminder that she is no longer the only one by his side. The thought of him being pulled away by those newcomers is unbearable. She envisions him surrounded, his attention divided, and a sharp pang of regret pierces her heart. She realizes with a jolt of agony that her earlier rejection may have caused a wound too deep to heal, and the fear that she has waited too long to fix it begins to take hold. This sudden realization sends her into a frantic state. She clutches her head, her eyes wide with a burgeoning panic as the possibility of being too late echoes in her mind. Despite her fear, she tries to find a spark of hope by comparing her decade-long history with him to the brief time the others have known him. Convinced that their bond is still the strongest, she resolves to take action. She pulls out her phone, her heart racing as she prepares to send a message that could change everything, trusting in his unwavering kindness to see her through. Her fingers hover over the screen as she carefully crafts her words. She types and deletes, struggling to strike the right balance between being honest and not appearing too desperate. After several attempts, she settles on a direct admission that she has changed her mind about their relationship, hoping it will be enough to bridge the gap she created. With a trembling thumb, she finally hits send. The instant the message leaves her device, a wave of sheer, unadulterated embarrassment washes over her. She flails in her seat, her face burning a deep crimson as the reality of her confession sinks in, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. As she waits for a response, her imagination runs wild with visions of their future together. She can almost hear the whispers of others commenting on their new status as a couple, and the mere thought of facing him in class now that the truth is out makes her squirm with a mix of dread and giddy anticipation. The phone pings, and her breath hitches. She stares at the screen, her eyes scanning his reply with desperate intensity. He expresses relief that she is doing well, but the casual nature of his words feels like a bucket of cold water. The realization that he might have completely missed the weight of her confession leaves her stunned. A heavy silence falls over her. She sits motionless, her expression a mask of disbelief as she tries to process his underwhelming reaction. The hope that had been soaring moments ago now hangs in a precarious balance, leaving her to wonder if he is simply in shock or if she has truly lost her chance. She finally hears the familiar chime of a notification, her heart leaping as she sees he has replied. Her initial joy quickly sours into a mix of embarrassment and irritation as she frantically taps at the screen, wondering why he is making this so difficult for her. The screen displays a blunt, heart-wrenching rejection, a simple message stating that he cannot go out with her, punctuated by a mocking, cat-like doodle. A silent scream of disbelief erupts from her as the reality of the words sinks in, her eyes wide with shock and her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. Later that afternoon, as the school bells chime to signal the end of the day, he finds her waiting for him on the rooftop, his expression one of mild bewilderment as he approaches. She stands her ground, her voice trembling with frustration as she demands to know if he truly has no idea why she summoned him to this secluded spot. While he scratches his head in genuine confusion, her hand tightens into a white-knuckled fist, the sting of his earlier rejection still fresh. The confrontation escalates as she accuses him of treating her feelings like a joke, her anger boiling over at his perceived nonchalance. He stammers in response, admitting that he hadn't taken her confession seriously because of their history, which only fuels her indignation. Despite her blushing face and the obvious vulnerability in her eyes, she continues to press him, declaring that she is finally giving him exactly what he once desired. He remains firm but gentle, explaining that while her words make him happy, he cannot simply change his mind now, reminding her that she was the one who initially rejected him. Tears begin to well in her eyes as she shouts that the circumstances have changed and that she should be the only person he cares about, her desperation becoming palpable. He looks at her with a somber, reflective gaze, admitting that for the longest time, his entire world had indeed revolved around her. She had been his sole source of motivation, a one-sided devotion that defined his every action. However, he explains that her rejection served as a painful but necessary wake-up call, making him realize how narrow his perspective had become. He reflects on the others who have supported him, Alyssa, Yuri, and Yutako, and concludes that he now wants to focus his energy on the people who were there for him when he was at his lowest, leaving her standing in stunned, silent realization. He bows deeply, his voice steady but final as he delivers the rejection. He explains that a relationship between them is simply not possible right now, leaving her standing in stunned silence. Desperation begins to take hold of her as she frantically searches for a reason, assuming his coldness is merely lingering anger from their past. She offers to apologize repeatedly, begging him to reconsider, but he remains unmoved, stating that his decision is final and no longer born of spite. As he turns to leave, she lunges forward and seizes his arm, her composure shattering into a tearful plea. She demands to know why he won't just listen, insisting that he has always belonged by her side and questioning what could possibly matter more than their shared history. The physical contact is too much, and he violently wrenches his arm from her grasp with a sharp, sudden movement. His voice rises to a shout, a rare display of temper as he declares with absolute certainty that he is not her property to be claimed or controlled. Having drawn a hard line, he softens his tone slightly to clarify that while he harbors no hatred for her, the love she seeks is simply not there. He offers a brief apology for his outburst before walking toward the exit, leaving her to collapse onto the cold rooftop as she begs him not to despise her. The heavy metal door swings shut with a final, echoing thud, sealing the boundary between them. She is left entirely alone in the vast, open space, her small frame trembling as the reality of his departure sinks in. In the silence of her isolation, a haunting image flickers in her mind of him walking away, flanked by others who now hold the place she once assumed was hers. Her heart cries out for him to wait, to not leave her behind in the shadows of what they used to be. She reflects on his words, realizing with a painful clarity that everything he said about his own devotion was equally true for her. For so long, her entire world had been centered on him, making him her sole source of motivation and the only person she truly cared to impress. Sobs rack her body as she hides her face in her hands, the weight of her regret becoming unbearable. She acknowledges that he and his creative work had been her only pillars of support during her darkest moments, and she is left wondering how she managed to let everything crumble so completely. Clinging to the fading memories, she wishes with all her might that she could return to a simpler time, specifically that afternoon in the classroom after school. It was a moment before the cracks appeared, a time she would give anything to inhabit once more. She collapses into a fit of hysterical sobbing, her hands clutching her head as if to hold back the crushing weight of her own choices. The realization of what she has lost is unbearable. She had once cruelly dismissed his dreams, telling him he could never be a great author and rejecting his heart, only to find that her regret has come far too late. He remains a haunting presence in her thoughts, his somber expression a mirror to the pain she caused. Looking back on her actions, she is forced to admit that her arrogance left her with nothing but the bitter task of sitting alone and weeping for her own stupidity. Beauties sits at his desk, the glow of the laptop illuminating his pensive face. He sighs, reflecting on his relationship with Michiru. While he acknowledges her importance to him, he can't help but feel frustrated by her constant need for validation and her tendency to expect everyone to align with her views. He leans back, the chair creaking as he stares at the ceiling. Guilt washes over him. Snapping at her was a mistake. He resolves to apologize and mend the rift. Suddenly, the quiet of his room is shattered by his mother's voice, announcing that his friends have arrived. He jolts upright, his heart skipping a beat at the unexpected visit. At the entrance, he finds Alyssa and Yuri waiting with bright smiles. They thank him for having them over, explaining that they made a spontaneous decision to visit today. He greets them, still trying to process the sudden change in his afternoon plans while they express their excitement to be there. The calm atmosphere is instantly vaporized when his father charges into the room with explosive energy. The man is practically vibrating with excitement, shouting out the girls' names with fan-like devotion. He is clearly starstruck, leaving his son frozen in a state of pure, unadulterated embarrassment as the girls look on in surprise. The man continues his over-the-top hospitality, urging his wife to prepare tea while apologizing for the humbleness of their home. He insists that the guests head straight up to his son's room to get comfortable. Meanwhile, his mother remains the picture of composure, used to her husband's dramatic outbursts, and simply nodding in agreement. As the group makes their way upstairs, the chaos continues unabated. His father's enthusiasm is so intense it borders on the absurd, requiring his mother to physically restrain him and remind him not to disturb the young people. He can only offer a weak, mortified apology to his friends as they escape the spectacle and direction to the safety of his room. Once inside the sanctuary of his bedroom, the girls begin to look around with genuine interest. Alyssa and Yuri are impressed by the tidiness of the space, noting that it's even more organized than they expected. He stands awkwardly by the door, his nerves still frayed from the encounter downstairs, trying to act natural. They settle in as he watches them, his face flushing deep crimson. His heart hammers against his ribs, the sound echoing in his ears. The reality of being alone with them is overwhelming. He watches as Yuri explores his personal space, her eyes darting around the room with intense curiosity. Suddenly, she loses her footing with a startled cry, nearly tumbling over as she takes in the surroundings of where he spends his time. Because of the sudden proximity, her imagination begins to run wild, a deep blush creeping across her face as she envisions him leaning over her in a moment of unexpected intimacy. She quickly tries to shake the scandalous thought from her head, though her heart continues to race. Meanwhile, Alyssa stands near his desk, her hand trembling slightly as she breathes in the lingering scent of the room. She finds herself overwhelmed by the realization that this is the very place where he pours his heart into his work, and the intimacy of the space makes her pulse throb. The weight of this realization brings her to tears, much to his frantic confusion. She explains through her sobs that she is deeply moved by the sheer dedication and the sleepless nights he must have endured in pursuit of his craft, eventually reaching out to clasp his hands in a gesture of profound respect. Seeing this display of emotion, Yuri declares that they are now comrades in arms, united by their shared devotion. Alyssa agrees wholeheartedly, noting that while she understands the feeling, Yuri treats him with a reverence that borders on the divine. As the initial wave of emotion subsides, they begin to settle into the room, though Yuri remains visibly overwhelmed by the situation. Alyssa thanks her for her passion, while he can only watch, still trying to process the intense energy filling his small living space. In the midst of the conversation, Yuri suddenly freezes, realizing that she has never actually been in a boy's room of her own age before. Sensing the tension, Alyssa gently suggests that they all sit down and relax, trying to bring a sense of normalcy back to the gathering. She remains flustered, however, and feels the need to clarify that she doesn't have any close male friends or a boyfriend, making him the very first guy she has ever been this close to. The admission sends her heart into a frantic rhythm, leaving him stunned by the weight of her words. Not to be outdone, Alyssa chimes in with a similar confession, assuring him that he is her first male friend as well. He is left speechless, laughing nervously at the sheer absurdity and honor of being the primary focus for two such remarkable girls. Leaning in close enough for him to feel her breath, she whispers a final, intimate secret, reminding him that he was also the first person to see her in such a vulnerable state. Her proximity and the softness of her voice leave him completely rooted to the spot, his heart pounding against his ribs. He sits at the table as his mother enters, the steam from the freshly brewed tea filling the room. His mother sets the tray down with a warm smile, and Alyssa takes the opportunity to express her gratitude for the help she received previously. As his mother leaves, the atmosphere shifts when Alyssa leans in dangerously close, her voice a soft murmur as she invites him to visit her home so she can thank him properly. Before he can process the invitation, Yuri's curiosity is piqued by a notebook she discovered on the floor, and she eagerly asks for permission to peek inside. She begins leafing through the pages of the storybook, her eyes widening as she realizes what it contains. He explains with a sheepish grin that those are just short stories he used to write when he was much younger, a hobby he's kept since childhood. This admission brings back memories of long hours spent hunched over a desk, first scrawling words by hand, and later typing away on the old computer his father had passed down to him. Alyssa is genuinely impressed by his dedication, finding the idea of him writing entire stories by hand to be quite remarkable. The room falls into a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of Yuri's soft sobbing as she reaches the end of a tale. He watches her, his face flushing with a mix of confusion and intense embarrassment, insisting that the writing is amateurish and not worth such a reaction. Despite his protests, she remains deeply moved, clutching the notebook to her chest as she declares the story to be incredibly touching. Seeing her friend's reaction, Alyssa's interest is fully ignited, and she practically begs to be allowed to read the manuscript as well. Soon, she too is overcome with emotion, her eyes welling up as she absorbs the narrative he crafted in his youth. He can only stare in disbelief, unable to fathom how his elementary school efforts could elicit such a powerful response from both of them. They both turn their gazes toward him, their eyes shimmering with newfound respect and a deep, emotional connection to his words. The weight of their shared admiration hangs in the air, leaving him momentarily speechless. Suddenly, they are both on their feet, physically urging him forward with a shared sense of purpose. They insist that his talent is too great to be kept hidden and that he must share his work with the entire world by uploading it online. He finds himself caught in the whirlwind of their enthusiasm as they nod in unison, reinforcing their belief that his stories are true masterpieces. They urge him to take the leap immediately, convinced that his future fans are already waiting to discover his voice. He feels a wave of embarrassment wash over him, unable to fully grasp why they are so captivated by a story he wrote so long ago. Despite his hesitation, their overwhelming enthusiasm finally wears him down, and he reluctantly agrees to give it a shot. Because of his agreement, the girls soften their stance, with the musician apologizing for their collective pushiness while reiterating how much they truly want to experience the work in a clearer format. He assures them it is no trouble, though he realizes he will need to transcribe the entire handwritten manuscript into a digital file first. He then makes a casual claim that leaves his companions speechless. He estimates that he can type out the entire 50,000-character story in roughly an hour. The sheer scale of the task compared to the short time frame leaves the three women stunned, their faces frozen in disbelief at such an impossible boast. He is met with immediate skepticism as they question how he could possibly manage such a feat without the original notebook in front of him. He simply smiles, explaining that he retains a perfect memory of every word he has ever written, a revelation that only adds to their growing sense of awe. They continue to whisper among themselves as he prepares to begin, still struggling to comprehend the mental fortitude required for a writer to recall their work with such precision. He takes a deep breath, focusing his mind on the task ahead as he settles into his chair. He positions himself at the desk, his hands hovering over the keyboard as the girls watch with bated breath, offering words of encouragement while urging him not to overexert himself. With a final nod of determination, he signals that he is ready to start. Suddenly, his fingers become a blur of motion, striking the keys with a rhythmic intensity that sounds like a frantic drum roll. The girls can only watch in sheer terror and amazement, noting that his movements are so fluid and rapid they leave after images, likening his skill to that of a world-class pianist. Moments later, he leans back, announcing that the task is complete. The trio crowds around the monitor, marveling not only at the speed of the transcription, but at the fact that he corrected grammatical errors and refined the prose entirely from memory, leaving them to wonder if he is even human. They are moved to tears once more after reading the polished digital version, while he remains humble, doubting that such a story could ever achieve professional success. However, his skepticism is short-lived as he refreshes the upload page to find a flood of comments and direct messages already pouring in. He stares at the screen in stunned silence, unable to process the immediate explosion of popularity his childhood story has triggered. His friends lean in close, their faces beaming with pride as they point out that this incredible reception was the only possible outcome for a work of such undeniable quality. While he sat in shock at the sudden explosion of his work's popularity, elsewhere, his words were already reaching their intended audience. Sakadera, relaxing in her apartment on her day off, stared at her laptop screen with a flushed face and a racing heart. Clutching a cold can of alcohol, she marveled at the sheer impact of the writing, noting that the author, known to her as Kamamatsu-sensei, had truly brought out the big guns this time. Even in her private moments, the intensity of his prose was enough to leave her breathless and impressed. Later that evening, the household is bustling with unexpected life. The father returns home to find the living room filled with guests, and his wife warmly invites Michiru, Alyssa, and Yuri to stay for dinner, an offer they accept with cheerful enthusiasm. The dinner table becomes a scene of domestic warmth, with the mother's cooking receiving high praise from the young guests. Meanwhile, the father finds himself humorously restrained, kept at a distance to ensure he doesn't overwhelm the girls with his boisterous energy. As they eat, the conversation turns to the day's events, with Michiru explaining that her early return was due to a long day of basketball practice. Just then, Yutako makes her entrance, greeted warmly by the group as she joins the gathering. Suddenly, Michiru bursts into the room with explosive energy, her voice filled with excitement. She has just finished reading Yuta's latest story and is eager to share her overwhelming praise, her pride in him evident to everyone present. She then notices the other guests, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight of Alyssa and Yuri. The atmosphere at the table shifts slightly as the group acknowledges the new arrivals, with Yutako settling in among them. Undeterred by any awkwardness, the energetic girl enthusiastically greets Alyssa, her high energy contrasting with the others' more reserved and shy demeanor. The room is filled with the sound of her clapping and cheerful exclamations. She quickly pivots back to Yuta, playfully reminding him to wash his hands before they continue their discussion. Her vibrant personality dominates the space, bringing a sense of lively chaos to the quiet dinner. She continues her praise, recounting how her entire basketball club was moved to tears by his writing. She marvels at how his work resonates even with middle school girls, a testament to his growing skill as a novelist. Amidst the chatter, Yuta's father suggests he check the latest novelist rankings. He leans in close to Yutako as they look at the screen together, a moment of quiet anticipation as they wait to see the results of his hard work. He stares at the screen in disbelief. The numbers, 300,000 points, and the top ranking for his story, "I offer my heart to you," burning into his mind. Beside him, Yutako leans in so close that the scent of her hair fills his senses, her face mere inches from his, sending his heart into a frantic rhythm. While the young author struggles with his nerves, his father remains bound to a chair in the center of the room, yet his spirit is undampened as he loudly proclaims his expertise as an editor. The rest of the group watches the spectacle from the dinner table, the domestic chaos contrasting sharply with the professional milestone they just witnessed. He continues his lecture, adjusting his glasses with a flourish as he explains that while even major hits might gather 20,000 points in a day, Yuta's achievement of 300,000 in mere hours is a once-in-a-year phenomenon. Alyssa and Yuri listen with wide-eyed wonder, the sheer scale of the success finally sinking in. The man doesn't stop there, confidently asserting that such a massive response will undoubtedly lead to a manga adaptation and numerous serialization offers. The girls exchange glances, realizing that their friend is on the verge of a major career breakthrough. Despite his physical restraint, he remains adamant that Yuta's work belongs with his publishing company, dismissing any potential competitors like Sakadera. His passion for his son's talent is as overwhelming as the ropes holding him in place. This boisterous display finally pushes his wife to her limit, and she looms over him with a terrifying, demonic aura, demanding he silence himself. Even as he is threatened, he continues to babble about live-action films and anime adaptations, his excitement completely eclipsing his survival instincts. Once the outburst is quelled, she returns to her gentle self, declaring the meal a celebration of her son's success and urging everyone to return to their food. The tension in the room dissipates, replaced by the warm aroma of the home-cooked dinner. As they settle back into their meal, Michiru turns her attention to the guest of honor, asking what his plans are for the story now that it has gained such traction. She and the others wait for his answer, curious if he intends to accept the offers and continue the narrative. He hesitates, looking down at his plate as he admits that the story was something he wrote back in elementary school, fueled by a mindset he no longer feels he can easily replicate. The weight of the sudden expectations begins to press down on him, making him doubt his ability to meet them. This admission is met with an immediate and unified response from the four girls, who lean forward with intense, unwavering gazes. In a single, thunderous voice, they command him to continue, their collective passion leaving him no room for retreat. The group continues their relentless appeal, their voices overlapping as they plead for the story to go on. Michiru and Alyssa express their deep emotional connection to the work, while Yuri adds her own enthusiastic support. Yuta, caught in the middle of their collective fervor, can only offer a hesitant response, his gratitude for their passion warring with his own internal uncertainty. Suddenly, the door slides open and his mother enters, her hands coming together in a sharp clap that cuts through the chatter. She reminds the group of the late hour, her expression firm but kind as she warns them not to disturb the neighbors. Yuta looks on, relieved by the sudden intervention. Seeing the girls' disappointment at the night ending, she surprises everyone by offering to let them stay over. The room erupts in a chorus of cheers and excited agreement, the tension of the previous debate instantly replaced by the thrill of an impromptu sleepover. They immediately scramble into action, rushing toward the guest room with infectious energy. His mother directs the flow of movement, assigning tasks for setting out the futons and ensuring everyone is settled for the night. Once the chaos has moved to another room, she turns her attention back to the kitchen, the sound of running water filling the quiet space. She asks him to help her with the evening's dishes, a familiar domestic routine that offers a moment of calm. He joins her at the sink, handing over a stack of plates while quietly thanking her for her hospitality toward his friends. She dismisses the gratitude with a gentle smile, noting that since they are his friends, it is only natural to welcome them. As he works, his mind drifts back to the pressure he felt earlier, wondering if he only agreed to continue the story because he lacked the strength to refuse their earnest requests. The weight of their expectations feels heavy, a burden he isn't sure he's ready to carry. Sensing his hesitation, she speaks up without looking away from the soapy water, reminding him that he still has the right to say no. She points out that he hasn't given a final answer to his editor yet, and that the choice should ultimately be his alone. She reaches out to gently pat his head, her touch offering a silent form of comfort and reassurance. She tells him not to worry about what others want or their attempts to sway him, promising that she will support whatever path he chooses to take, regardless of anyone else's opinion. He looks up at her, a small, genuine smile finally touching his lips as he thanks her for her understanding. She returns the smile, her eyes full of maternal warmth, as they stand together in the quiet kitchen. She had provided the spark he needed, and as he watched his friends sleep peacefully, a wave of gratitude washed over him for the new outlook they had given his life. He reflected on the day he had nearly abandoned his craft, realizing that their support was the only thing that had kept him from laying down his pen for good. With this motivation fueling him, he sat at his desk, casting aside the hesitation that had previously stunted his growth. He resolved to meet the expectations of those who believed in him, starting with a reply to his editor before diving headfirst back into his work. His fingers began to dance across the keyboard, the rhythmic tapping echoing his resolve to offer his very heart to the world through his writing. While he found his rhythm, the situation was far different for the girl who had been his muse, as the grand exterior of her home masked a growing despair. Inside, the once orderly rooms had fallen into disarray, with discarded clothes and unwashed dishes mirroring the chaotic state of her mind as she whispered his name into the silence. She lay curled on her bed, the sudden chime of her phone announcing a new chapter from the author she adored, yet the notification only brought fresh tears to her eyes. To her, Those stories had always been a sanctuary, but now she found herself unable to even look at the screen, overwhelmed by a sense of grief. The weight of her isolation, born from a mother long gone and a father far away, made the story she once loved feel like a painful mirror she could no longer bear to face. She feared that any part of the narrative might be an indirect critique of her own life, leaving her to stare at a rolled-up poster in the shadows of her room. Far from her lonely room, a different kind of attention was being paid to her, centered on a dartboard where her image served as the bullseye. Outside the modern residence of the Nakatsugawa family, the night remained deceptively still. The man responsible for the marksmanship sat back as his phone alerted him to her latest activity, his focus narrowing on the name, Ukawa Michiru, as a dart thudded into the board beside him. He leaned back with a predatory grin, a dart poised in his hand as he decided that the time had finally come to make her his. He sits bathed in the glow of his monitor, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he envisions the torment he is about to unleash. On the wall behind him, a photograph of Michiru serves as a grim target, a dart buried deep in her forehead. His thoughts are consumed by a sadistic curiosity, wondering how a girl he deems so resilient will react when she is finally forced to squirm under his control. In a separate, heartbreaking reality, she lies huddled in her bed, her face buried in a pillow as she sobs uncontrollably, her spirit already beginning to fray from the isolation, entirely unaware of the dark obsession closing in on her. Sakadera-sensei sits poised in her workspace, her sharp gaze framed by her glasses as she welcomes the start of a new chapter in their professional journey. The following morning, a polite knock echoes through the quiet neighborhood as the decision to serialize the new work sets a new series of events into motion. She stands at the threshold, dressed in a sharp business suit that exudes a mature, professional charm even on a Sunday morning. Yuta greets her with a mix of surprise and admiration, noting how her formal attire contrasts with the casual weekend atmosphere. Stepping inside, her eyes immediately fall upon the rows of shoes in the entryway, prompting a sharp question about whether he has guests over. He begins to stammer, his composure crumbling as he realizes the difficulty of the situation. His mother suddenly appears, offering a polite apology for the cluttered entryway and the unexpected intrusion on their meeting. He remains in a state of visible panic, struggling to find the right words to explain the presence of the others. She graciously invites the visitor into the living room for tea, momentarily diffusing the tension. He watches them, still reeling from the close call and the potential for a massive misunderstanding. He breathes a sigh of relief, grateful for his mother's quick intuition in keeping the famous guests upstairs and out of sight. The task of explaining why a superstar and a famous singer were under his roof would have been nearly impossible. Once settled at the dining table, the editor speaks with infectious enthusiasm, comparing the potential of his new work to the industry's biggest hits. He listens with a humble smile, though the weight of such high praise clearly affects him. She suddenly produces her phone, urging him to look at the latest data with a look of pure triumph. He stares at the screen in disbelief, seeing his title sitting at the very top of the yearly rankings. She exclaims that he has achieved a year's worth of success in a single day, a feat she considers truly anime-worthy. He can only stammer in shock, while Michiru peeks from the hallway, drawn by the commotion and wondering what could have caused such a stir. Sakadera explains that the overwhelming points aren't just a measure of satisfaction, but a testament to the immense expectations the readers now have for him. Yuta listens intently, his fist clenching as a sense of validation washes over him. He finally feels that his difficult decision was the correct one. His editor then presses him, asking if he is prepared to commit to rewriting the story into a full-length series. She continues by mentioning a special meeting scheduled for the following week at the editorial department, piquing his curiosity. When he asks for clarification, she casually reveals that the discussion will center around a project called Offerheart, a name that clearly carries significant weight. The young author is nearly knocked back by the revelation. An anime adaptation offer has already been put on the table. He stammers in disbelief, questioning if such a thing could really happen overnight. But his editor remains perfectly composed, assuring him that their company's strong ties with the animation industry made it easy to get the ball rolling. She leans in with a confident smirk, declaring him the greatest hit of the century after his work topped the yearly rankings in a single day. Poking him playfully on the cheek, she asks if he truly wants to turn down such a monumental opportunity, asserting that with the momentum they have, the anime couldn't possibly fail. He admits that while the offer makes him incredibly happy, the sheer speed at which everything is moving is becoming a bit frightening. He explains that he only just found the confidence to continue writing the previous night, and now the weight of these skyrocketing expectations is starting to feel heavy. Seeing his hesitation, his mother speaks up from across the table, her voice filled with unwavering support as she tells him that he can do it. She urges him to have more confidence in himself, reinforcing the idea that he has the talent to meet this challenge. His editor stands up, slamming her hands on the table to emphasize her point, agreeing wholeheartedly with his mother. She promises that the entire editorial department and the anime staff will be fully behind him, providing all the support he needs to succeed. Looking at the supportive faces around him and thinking of the others who believe in him, he feels a surge of renewed determination. He realizes he isn't alone in this journey and, with a bright smile, he firmly declares that he has made his decision and will give it his absolute best. His mother, unable to contain her excitement at the news, hurries toward the door, eager to share the incredible development with the rest of the household. She leaves him standing there, still processing the life-changing turn his career has just taken. In another room, the girls are startled as she bursts in, shouting about the huge news. Alyssa, Yuri, Yutako, and Michiru look up in surprise from their evening routine, their eyes wide as they prepare to hear about the anime offer that will change all of their lives. She watches in stunned silence as the professional woman leans in dangerously close to the young author. The woman's scent and mature aura are overwhelming, and she makes it clear that her primary focus is bringing his work to the world before excusing herself for the morning. Just as the tension seems to break, a new shock arrives when two more girls descend the stairs, their presence catching everyone off guard. The group stares in disbelief, wondering why they are coming down from the private quarters of the house in such a casual state. Standing at the foot of the stairs in their pajamas, the two newcomers present a striking contrast. One carries herself with a regal, almost defiant air, while the other appears more reserved. Their choice of attire only deepens the confusion of those already gathered in the hallway. The professional woman offers a simple greeting, prompting a frantic explanation from the boy. He stammers that they all became friends at a recent party, his hands waving dismissively as he tries to downplay the unusual living arrangement to his editor. Stepping forward with poise, the blonde girl introduces herself using the boy's own surname, a move that sends him into a fresh spiral of embarrassment. He internally screams at the realization that she is using his name as her own, while the others look on with growing suspicion. Following her companion's lead, the younger girl introduces herself with a cheerful smile, but the friendly atmosphere is short-lived. The other girls in the room immediately corner the boy, demanding a full and immediate explanation of his relationship with these unexpected house guests. Amidst the rising clamor of voices, the professional woman observes the scene with a knowing, slightly amused expression. She watches as the boy is besieged by questions, his attempts to explain himself drowned out by the persistent nagging of his companions. Seizing the moment of chaos, the woman leans in and introduces herself with a mischievous glint in her eye, claiming to be the boy's wife. The declaration hits the room like a thunderbolt, leaving the other girls frozen in absolute shock, while the boy's face turns a deep shade of crimson. With a playful wink and a blown kiss, she makes her exit, leaving a trail of devastation in her wake. The boy is left to face the full brunt of the girls' jealousy and confusion, his protests ignored as they demand to know if this is the kind of woman he truly prefers. From the safety of the kitchen, his parents watch the ongoing interrogation with a mix of pity and amusement. His mother eventually steps in to clarify the situation for everyone, though the boy remains at the center of a whirlwind of feminine energy and unresolved questions. He stands by as Alyssa and Yuri offer their polite farewells to his mother and Michiru. The two girls express their sincere gratitude for the hospitality, though they seem a bit reluctant to leave the warmth of the household. His mother warmly invites them to return anytime, while Michiru watches them go with a mix of quiet emotions. Later, the trio arrives at a towering office building, having been summoned by Sakadera to discuss the upcoming anime adaptation. While he wonders about the specific details they'll be receiving, Alyssa and Yuri are visibly overwhelmed by the scale of the workplace, their nerves beginning to show as they prepare to enter the professional environment. As they approach the entrance, their attention is drawn to a growing commotion nearby. A dense crowd has gathered, filled with people clamoring for photos and autographs from someone they clearly consider a major celebrity. The air is thick with excitement and the constant chatter of fans eager to catch a glimpse of their idol. Amidst the chaos, a familiar voice cuts through the noise, calling out to him. A flamboyant young man in a white suit pushes through the crowd, addressing him as a dear rival. The sudden appearance catches everyone off guard, especially the girls, who are left wondering who this self-proclaimed prince could possibly be. With a flourish of imaginary roses and a dazzling aura, the man makes his grand entrance, followed by a trail of adoring fans. He seems to thrive on the attention, striking a pose that radiates confidence and theatricality. Alyssa and Yuri can only watch in stunned silence, completely baffled by the sheer intensity of the man's presence and his strange connection to their friend. He wastes no time in introducing himself with theatrical flair, revealing his name to be Hakuba. He boasts of his triple threat status as a light novel author, a professional model, and the heir to a massive fortune. Turning his attention to Alyssa, he offers a charming greeting, addressing her as a princess and leaving her utterly speechless by his forwardness. Upon arriving at the editorial department for a meeting, the group is startled by the sudden appearance of the flamboyant Prince Hakuba, who greets them with theatrical flair. He strikes a confident pose as Michiru and Yuri admire a magazine featuring him, confirming that his reputation as a multi-talented idol is indeed well-founded. Instead of a standard business card, he presents a more personal token, leaving Yuta stunned to learn that this man is not only a professional model, but also the heir to a pharmaceutical empire. The discussion turns to his literary achievements, specifically the massive success of his series Grimm, which has expanded into a sprawling franchise of anime and merchandise that even Yuta admits to following. He continues to praise the senior author's prolific output, mentioning his enjoyment of other titles like Holy Swordsman and Deadpan Familiar, which clearly delights the older man. However, the atmosphere shifts when Hakuba suddenly proclaims him a dear rival, confessing his deep frustration that his own sales couldn't match the overwhelming popularity of the young man's Digimus series. While the girls find the notion of a heated rivalry between two brilliant authors to be incredibly romantic, he can only watch awkwardly as the flamboyant man slumps in a fit of dramatic despair. He attempts to remain humble, but Hakuba insists that he is the superior talent, a declaration that leaves the young author feeling both flustered and undeserving of such high praise. Ultimately, the senior author finds a renewed sense of purpose, vowing to eventually surpass his rival, while he leaves the encounter feeling deeply encouraged and motivated by the respect of his peer. He winces as the flamboyant author stares in disbelief, his voice rising as he questions the news of an anime adaptation for a work uploaded only days ago. The young man realizes too late that he shouldn't have mentioned the offer so casually, especially to someone so invested in their professional rivalry. While he remains frozen in shock, the others join the conversation, noting that while the speed of the offer is incredible, it makes sense given the quality of the work. The group discusses the inevitability of such success, though the news clearly hits the rival author harder than anyone expected. The weight of the news finally breaks his composure, sending him crashing to his knees in the middle of the hallway as he gasps out his frustration. He acknowledges the terrifying strength of the one he considers his greatest rival, feeling the gap between them widen in an instant. Still on the floor, he mutters about the sheer unfairness of it all, comparing his own hard-won success in his 20s to a teenager who already has 2 anime series to his name. The girls look on with a mix of pity and awkwardness as he wallows in his frustration, his pride momentarily shattered. Suddenly, he surges back to his feet with renewed vigor, striking a dramatic pose and declaring that he will not be outdone by his rival's rapid success. He reveals his true purpose for being there, to finalize the release of yet another series and secure his own next anime adaptation. With a flourish, he announces his new project, a fantasy titled Behemoth Slayers, which immediately catches the young author's interest and sparks genuine excitement. The competitive tension momentarily fades as they both share a moment of pure enthusiasm for a new story. Having reclaimed his princely aura, he extends a hand in a gesture of mutual respect, officially acknowledging the bond between them as dear rivals. He promises to purchase the upcoming release of Offer Heart, cementing their status while the others watch the theatrical display with amused smiles. He offers a soft, genuine smile, his earlier theatrics replaced by a moment of sincere connection as they share their mutual passion for their craft. The young man responds with equal warmth, expressing his gratitude for the encouragement and the shared journey they are both on. Moments later, the flamboyant author makes a grand exit, his cape-like coat fluttering as he bids a dramatic farewell to his rival. The girls giggle at the intensity of the exchange, though one of them lingers for a moment, sensing the weight of the expectations now resting on her friend's shoulders. As they make their way through the building, the teasing continues, leaving the young author blushing and flustered by their playful comments. Their path eventually crosses with his father, who is busy with his own professional duties, bringing a sudden touch of domestic reality to the end of their eventful encounter. He stands by as his father maintains a strictly professional demeanor, guiding the group toward a meeting room. The contrast between his father's usual warmth and this corporate persona is jarring, but they follow him down the hall to their destination. Upon entering the room, they are greeted by Sakadera and an energetic man with glasses. The man, Director Midakayama, is boisterous, laughing loudly as he welcomes them and expresses his excitement about working on the anime adaptation of Sakadera's work. While the director continues his enthusiastic greeting, Sakadera remains focused, her attention divided as she manages other responsibilities. She briefly acknowledges the group's arrival before returning to her tasks, leaving the director to lead the conversation. Moments later, the atmosphere softens as apologies are exchanged regarding the events of the previous weekend. Alyssa and Yuri are thanked for their time, and they respond with grace, dismissing any concerns about the past disruptions. Once everyone is settled, a professional woman steps forward to begin the formal presentation. She moves with purpose, preparing to reveal the specific reason for this gathering as the group watches with anticipation. She unveils a plan for a special promotional episode for the first volume of the series. This short-form anime will serve as a high-quality introduction to the world, featuring the same voice actors and production standards as the main series. The director emphasizes the scale of the project, assuring everyone that the same team behind other successful works will be dedicated to this masterpiece. The group is impressed by the level of effort being invested so early in the production. Turning her focus to the 2 young women, the staff member explains their specific roles. Alyssa is slated to perform the ending theme, while Yuri has been selected to voice the main character. The news is met with a mix of surprise and determination. They both accept the challenge with fervor, expressing their gratitude for the opportunity. Their excitement is palpable as they promise to pour their entire hearts into their respective roles, much to the delight of the staff. With the core team assembled and motivated, the director and the promotional lead share a moment of intense resolve. They are committed to bringing the story to the world with the best possible quality, leaving no room for slack. She watches as the 2 young women pledge their absolute dedication to the project, their faces filled with a resolve that clearly moves the young author. Yuta, overcome by the support surrounding him, can barely contain his tears, clenching his fist as he silently vows to pour his soul into the writing to honor their efforts. Standing alongside the director and the new cast, she presents the title of the upcoming promotional episode, I Offer My Heart, as the group solidifies their shared vision. This collective energy explodes into a chorus of cheers and determined shouts, the entire production team rising as one to meet the challenge ahead. Meanwhile, the vibrant neon lights of a towering karaoke building pierce the night sky, echoing with the muffled sounds of celebration and song. Inside one of the crowded rooms, Nakagawa takes center stage, his voice filling the space as he sings with a confidence that draws adoring cheers from the girls in the group. Amidst the excitement, Michiru sits quietly on the periphery, her gaze fixed downward, seemingly worlds away from the festivities. As he continues his performance, he casts a brief glance toward her, while she looks up with a flicker of unease, her expression clouded by a lingering distress. Noticing her withdrawal, her friends lean in to check on her, expressing concern that she still appears exhausted despite joining them for the night. She remains silent, feeling the weight of their scrutiny and the oppressive atmosphere of the room. They remind her how worried they were during her recent absence from school, offering a listening ear, but she simply stares at the floor, convinced that words alone cannot fix the turmoil within her. Sensing the moment to depart, he excuses himself with a casual remark about having too much soda, but as he turns away from the group, a dark, knowing smirk crosses his face.